fun.
twice a show. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, James, you've been playing like 30 years? 30, roughly?
40.
Oh, geez. Started back in like the grade. My 5th grade teacher got the whole class together and split everybody up into their own little groups.
Wow, so you learned to play D&D in school, or you got introduced to it? That's amazing. We were taught we're not allowed to play it. It was kind of,
wow.
they're getting like, if we thought about doing it in school, then, well, we could sit in a library if we were quiet at the time, so yeah.
It was kind of a trick, I guess, to get people to write, because he'd run the group through one encounter, and then he wouldn't do it again until everybody had written up that little section.
That is a smart way to do it. Yeah, you write a story, then you get to play more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
And you took to that class really hard, so to speak, really tough, because now you're doing it professionally. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And I must say that it's awesome because I've read through and used some products with stuff you've written from back Greyhawk days, like 25 years ago, up until Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2, and I've been a Pathfinder player, and now moving over to Pathfinder 2.
Yes,
so, yeah.
It's a big Pathfinder. Greyhawk and Pathfinder.
Got a puppy.
Oh yes, I have a puppy. That's Minnie. That's my familiar. Yep.
Yay.
Yep. She's 18 years old, and she's blind and deaf, but she's hanging in there, and she's very I need to feed her lots of treats. Then she's just happy staying there the entire show. So yeah, she's a Twitch veteran by now. Yeah.
We should count up on how many times you've been on a stream. It's got to be approaching.
I think
50?
I've been about 100 now, all in all, if we count from the very first.
Oh yeah, all the Legends of Lores too.
Yeah, so it's probably about 100 now with the games, and there's probably about 60 or so. Over 50, I think. Legends of Lore, then Gabbins and the games, and then some interviews and stuff. So I've probably been on Twitch now, I think, about almost 100 times.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And there's not much else to do than sit at your computer and
make maps up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually working on the White Plume Mountain right now.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm doing it first for my own campaign. They're going to set in Shieldlands and up towards the White Plume Mountain, and then if the map is good enough, then it will be introduced into future Greyhawk maps. And I'm doing a lot of stuff.
Hey, Wiley.
Press too.
Wiley, can you hear us? So make sure it sounds good.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Always just want to make sure that the sound's getting out to the broadcast, because I got to.
Yeah.
Hey, Prometheus. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Perfect. Water.
So James, if you on the front page, there's a little heart button. You can always hit that for me if you wouldn't mind. under the.
Get a follow.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
They're so hard to come by. Yeah, you had one button, boom. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. But audio's good. That's good to hear, Wiley. And thanks for the host on your channel. Really appreciate it. We are we're gonna have a good time tonight on this discussion. Gary Julian will definitely be on tonight too. Just so everyone's aware, Gary will be coming on to join us. Probably because Gary, if he's on now, is afraid of Len, so after Len departs, Gary will come on.
He doesn't know.
Len's intimidating.
Yeah, and Gary doesn't know enough Sewell to he just knows enough to be dangerous, and Leonard, you know way more, so you can put him in his place. Yeah.
Got some huge 3D print STL files from Gamescape 3D giveaway on Thursday's game. I mean, and one of them's the Castle Ruins. It's gargantuan. It's gonna be it'll be for the subscribers, so that's coming up on Thursday. We just love their stuff. We're into the 3D printing. So James, I'm not sure if you know a little bit about my channel. My Grail game is in its 40th year continuous since 1980.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, I think so.
How many sessions have you or games have you run? It's like 800 something.
We're on
Log-
adventure number 890.
Yeah, that's
and,
even more impressive. He keeps an adventure log on everything he runs. It's just, yeah.
yeah, I'm
Assume
gonna look
that's
up.
not all the same characters the whole time.
No, it's we actually have like second generation one now. We have like 20 adventuring groups. So Lord of the Scarlet Tide was number 405 out of 890. Okay,
Hey,
that's where we ran that. So that's going back. We average like what's that, 22 to 25 adventures a year, something like that. So I guess that's going back.
Jay has a gaming basement that makes every gamer on the planet jealous and,
Nice.
and envious of,
Yeah.
of
1E2E. We do 1E2E with miniatures and a tabletop style. So, and Eric's going to be playing in the game for Virtual GrailCon in 2 Saturdays. He's going to be
nice.
playing with Luke Gygax, Anna, Eric Mona, Gary Julian, and then Chuck Cumbo and Steven Chanel from Troller are going to be doing it too. So it'll be a fun one. Looking forward to it. Hopefully everyone's good tonight. It's going to be a great conversation. So 3 minutes will be on. Virtual GrailCon is in 2 weeks. I can't even believe it's coming that quickly. 60 some events we got, and we have we're approaching 200 registrations. So thank you all. Congratulations to the community. Listing of highlighted streams. We got 12 Twitch channels participate. Actually, let me rephrase that. 12 Twitch channels and now 1 YouTube channel. Grog Talk's going to be participating too. So we got 13 different channels, and plus there's a lot of games to sign up for. Scott Casper's OD and D game has a spot now, everyone, if you're listening in. So he had a cancellation, so that would be a good one to get in on. It's posted, so you can just hop on. Entry screen. James, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I got some putting some old memories up for you.
Wow.
Oh yes, I've some unbelievable
Oh,
stuff.
no.
Yes. So, I got a nice scroller going through, and we'll have some other
you
things.
dug too deep.
I've dug
Yeah,
deep on this.
Yeah,
Oh, there's
you
those,
found
there's those
lots of
green
stuff.
cows.
Yes. Oh, what a
Oh
great!
yeah, green cows from Dungeon. Yeah.
Absolutely. I wonder who did that artwork. I'm not sure on that cover.
It's a great one. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Going way back to
Good.
number 12. So.
Yeah.
I wonder, James, if I'm assuming you and Leonard were in some dragons maybe at the same time. I wonder about that.
I didn't actually get into Dragon until way later.
Okay.
I don't remember. It was just like a couple. It was after the Witches of the Ghost had taken over.
Okay. Yeah.
We're coming on
Yeah,
right now.
It was actually. I think it was. There was the Circle of Gaming. I think it was a White Plume Mountain sort of monster support article or something. I don't even remember.
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome. So there may not be some crossover between Liam's Tiny Hut and, oh my gosh. See, I thought I had everything memorized. Well, definitely not the Demonicon of Igwolf, which you have placed in the 300s, which is really cool. And we'll talk about that tonight. So welcome everyone. I was going to start a joke tonight. And if you've been on the Discords, we kind of, do we lock out here? Or is it just me? Did we lock up on Twitch, or is it just me? Is it just my?
Oh, the chat works.
Chat works.
Yeah,
Okay,
like,
good.
Yep.
So I was going to say hello. I'm Robert Wardall tonight, but I decided not to. Anna, yeah, stop myself. It looks like
You have to tell that story later.
I will tell that
Yeah.
story. It looks okay. That's good. So tonight we have, as usual, the great Anna Meyer, the legendary Leonard Lakofka for a little bit, as we always get Len for 45 minutes. And welcome James Jacobs tonight. Thank you, James, for coming on. This is an honor. Really is.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's both ways. I mean, it's when you first called me up and asked me to be on the show, I was like, sure. It's one of those things that I've never really thought of myself as like a Greyhawk person. And like a published Greyhawk person, but obviously I've done most of it through Dungeon Magazine and Drag Magazine. But it's my favorite of all of the D&D settings. I guess it was the first, so it was the first one that got its books into my head.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but you definitely are. You've written some awesome stuff for the setting. So
Yay.
whether it was published in Dragon, Dungeon, or as a separate module, yeah.
Early stuff. So I got a lot of picks and publications running all the way through to the culmination, of course, Expeditions to the Ruins of Greyhawk, which is, we'll save that for when Gary comes on.
I got mine. I do. I have one.
Awesome.
Sure I have one handy.
Okay.
There we go. You got that right here
look
too.
up
Absolutely.
something.
Yeah, I need to get my stuff here. So
Absolutely. But James's work is impressive. So why don't you just talk about how you got started? And Dungeon 12 is up, which is your first submission.
It was the first published one.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Awesome. Just talk a little bit about that and how that happened.
Yeah. Well, it was my first issue of Dragon magazine was 81, and I remember getting in the mail as my first magazine subscription, even when I was like maybe 10 or 11 years old. Had that cool picture of that giant sort of polar bear dragon thing fighting a guy on a mastodon, and I pretty much kept that subscription all the way through until the paper version ended. But I remember I would read it whenever it would come out, and then they had, I forget what volume, I think it was a 111, they had the announcement that they were going to start doing a adventures only magazine, dungeon magazine. And I'd already been doing a lot of just like homebrew, just writing adventures for my friends, for my sister. And I was like, well, I'll give that a shot. So I started sending in submissions. The first one I sent in got rejected, but it had like Roger Moore had a little note scribbled on the bottom. It was like, no thanks for now, but keep trying. And that keep trying really kind of was like it was the fulcrum, I guess. And I saw that and I was like, Roger Moore, the editor of Dungeon Magazine, wants me to keep trying, so I'd better keep trying. So I threw in a bunch of other proposals here and there, and they weren't really hitting. And so I decided I was going to try a gimmick with the sort of the pick a path sort of solo adventure with you read one entry, go to the next page, go to the next entry, Scepter of the Underworld.
Yep.
And that one got picked up. So that was the first one I got published back in it was high school. I was maybe 15, somewhere around there. And that was the start. My mom and dad were pretty supportive of the whole thing. They always supported my writing and my interest in genre fiction and all that. And they didn't really expect it to go anywhere. But then when I got a check for like $500 or whatever it was or 250, whatever it was back then, it was validation. Really was what it was. Yeah. And people who have a copy of Dungeon 12 handy, one thing I've learned through the years of working in role-playing games is you keep stealing from yourself like constantly. Like there's a character named Elasmus in that Scepter of the Underworld, which is of course the character that ended up in Pathfinder as one of the Rune Lords of Pathfinder. So
that is an awesome connection. Yeah.
Sometimes they're unintentional. You come up with a really cool name and then you forget it and you remember it like 3 years later. That's a great name.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So this will be a good one. So Leonard.
Yo.
What? What would you like to ask James while we have you here? So James has started at 15. Had a submission. So, and I know you're a Gary disciple. So back in the day, what do you think?
Yeah, I did Dragon number 1 and Dragon number 3. I was L1 got published in 1981, and then I started Lehman's Tiny Hut with 27 or 28 or something like that.
Yeah.
Dragon number 26.
Yeah. Was that a monthly? Was that in every issue? Was it only like a certain time of
every
year
third or something?
Well,
every third, yeah.
My attitude was, since I got paid by the word, I was very eager. I was very eager to send in stuff often, and there were a few times there that I had 4 or 5 or 6 dragons in a row. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And Leonard, you were just as far as James goes, I know you asked when Jason was on, you asked him, were you responsible for something? Oh, you were responsible for Lender Isle disappearing or whatever. So,
Well, actually, I just put a Corsair, a ship on from the northern Spindrift Islands. I sent that on to you, I think.
I'm not sure if I got
And
that.
then I did a new Undead today.
I saw that.
Oh,
I
yeah,
saw that,
the
Len.
new
That's
Undead
awesome.
today, but the other one I don't think I saw either. So
Yeah,
maybe you'll send it to Jay.
send that over to us.
Almost
Yeah.
everything is on Dungeons and Dragons Uncensored.
Awesome.
I almost
Yeah.
always go as my go-to group.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
I like to do 3, 4, or 5 groups. I just think it's a little excessive to go 7, 8, and 9 because
Groups? Well, I have, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I have
you mean
20.
like party members? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, in a group, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
James, you DM a lot?
Yeah, I probably half and half these days. I've got a game going on like up there. It's all going through Roll20 and other
Okay.
virtual
Oh
tabletop
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Now we
Yeah,
all
I've
play
got,
virtual. Yeah.
I'm running one right now. I'm playing enough games I have to stop and think which ones are which. But yeah.
So you have multiple games. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, cool. Anyone we would know that was DMing for you?
I've got one that's sort of a Legendary Planet over-the-top game that Jason Nelson, who runs Legendary Games.
Oh,
is
Okay.
running.
Okay.
Yep.
There's one that I'm doing every Friday night, an official Paizo Let's Play that Jason Bowman is running, the Band of Bravos. And the other one is sort of this creepy ghost occult pirates adventure that Mana Hammond is running, who just started over at Cobalt Portal.
Cool.
That's
Yeah.
a lot, and then and plus you're DMing. So you're wow.
Yeah.
A full week of games.
Well, assuming they all happen at the same week, which usually there's always I can't play, I'm tired.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah.
Gotta have the gaming dedication. It's tough sometimes with real life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You start a Twitch channel, and then you have an audience that expects a game, demands a game once a week.
Yeah.
Jared, so Josh, James, you don't have an official Twitch channel that you're using, correct?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So there you
Not
go,
yet.
Josh.
Yeah.
You know,
You
so-
should start a Twitch channel with world building and advice and stuff like
Yeah.
that
I mean, the more streaming and stuff I've been doing, I'm like, I should do something. But like,
Yeah.
I got an actual real microphone now, and
Yeah.
so
So
I'm getting there.
My first question would be, meaning we had Jason on a couple of weeks ago, and he seems to have kind of gravitated towards the mechanic side of role-playing games and very much rules have, at least in his work title and stuff like that. But you seem to have gravitated towards the setting and the stories and stuff like that. That's something that you consciously kind of went geared towards, or that's just something that just happened?
It's mostly something I've consciously gone toward. I've always been more interested in just the story side of things. When I'm running games, if there's a rule that I don't know off the top of my head, I'll just make something up and just keep going with it. I still really enjoy the rule side of things. And Jason's kind of like, I would almost say it's like the mirror version where he's amazing at just the rules design, but he's also really great, story guy.
So, definitely. But
Excellent.
So, it's definitely something that I've ended up having more fun with the world design and like adventures in particular.
So I see the works on this one page that I found started really hitting around 2000. Were you part of Living Greyhawk?
No, I wasn't. I actually have never been a part really of any of the organized play programs. I grew up in like tiny little town in Northern California.
Okay.
And just never really was in an environment where I could get into that. And by the time I was like, it was too big, and it was too, it's like I'm too intimidating, all that. But I really started around 2000 was actually when I started working at Wizards of the Coast and in their the sales department. I was doing order entry support, data entry stuff.
Oh, okay.
But I was in the building, and and so there was a lot of they had a very robust, supportive. If you want to write for Dungeons and Dragons, you could send in your ideas, pitch things to the magazines, and it just sort of took off.
So you're one of the few that were in the building long before you actually became professional game designer or world designer and stuff. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like it just took off at that point. So
Yeah.
I see this dragon here that I popped up, and I think this is Dragon 274, and the article is Beasts of the Pomarge, everyone. So
Ooh, that is
yes.
interesting. Yeah.
So I've found this, and there are some pretty crazy monsters in this that I don't think are being utilized as much as they should be. So please go to that
Yeah.
dragon and take a look at those.
What number?
274.
Oh, now I've got magazine shame because I've got all my magazines down back here, but they are organized sedimentary rather than in like, any way that I can reference.
Yeah,
them.
I have them as PDFs. So yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's nice.
I've got this set of CDs and stuff, and then I've scanned a few myself and
I've
stuff that.
probably
Yeah.
got that around here somewhere.
Yeah.
This is early 2000, so this was one of the firsts that I could see that was.
Was it still second edition, that one?
It has to be. It has to be second edition. It's right on that border between second and third, right?
Yeah.
It's right there. I haven't. Anna will pop it up and take a look and let you know.
256, you said?
No, 246.
246.
Nope,
Yeah.
I'm wrong twice. 274. Oh my gosh,
74.
my brain.
Okay, yeah.
I can't see. But I was like, oh my gosh, monsters in
Got
the
it.
Pomarge.
Oh yeah, now I see it. Yep.
Yeah,
Now I
so,
have the same front page.
Yeah,
here,
it's
so.
really cool. And I scanned through that. So did you ask to do Greyhawk? Did you ask to do a lot of Greyhawk work, or did they assign you?
Really, there was at that point in time they weren't really looking specifically for world specific articles. There was always this thing in Dragon magazine, Dungeon magazine, where it wasn't set for a specific campaign. It was less frightening, I guess, is the way to look at it for readers to try to figure out if they wanted to put a Forgotten Realms article in Greyhawk or wherever. So a lot of the articles, like just the sort of the new monsters, new spells, all of those things tended to be sort of world neutral, but that's no fun. I mean, there's so much stuff in Greyhawk that is just inspiring. That it's just something that I've always, whenever I was writing D&D stuff, I would just look at that and I want to just add more to it. It added so much to, growing up playing the game that I just wanted to play with it in public, I guess, and then add new stuff to it. So I think for that Beast of the Pomarge article, that was something that I pitched to the magazine teams that I just want to do a bunch of monsters set in the Pomarge. And
I've used some of this. I realize now that I used this in one of my games like 10 years ago or something like that.
The way that I think that you've officially become an RPG designer is if you're in a game where the GM uses something that you created and it kills your character. So I've been killed by a couple of monsters.
That's cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's just the beginning. You have Bestiary, Spawn of Elemental Evil. That's Dragon 285. Bestiary, Children of Tharisden. That's in Dragon Annual 5. And let's see what else we got here. Just crazy stuff, man. Spawn of Elemental Evil 285. Minions of Ayus is 270. So that's actually before the Beast of the Pomarge one. So there are specific Greyhawk bestiaries that you're doing at that time in the early 2000s, and which is really cool. And so I'm assuming you're working there at Wizards, and then you're throwing out some stuff that's getting traction at that point.
Yeah. And then you just sort of like start building up your reputation, and I guess like they realize that this James guy can do some pretty fun monsters, so each one gets a little bit easier to get into the works, and eventually it gets to a point where they start asking you to do stuff to fill gaps in the schedule or anything like that. So monsters are weird anyway, because it's hard to predict which ones are going to like take off and become evergreen, I guess, or like go through editions. I think it's mostly if you get a really cool piece of art for the monster, that really helps.
That's true. Yeah. And it's also one of these things that straddle between mechanics and story very much, because they are very mechanical in how they interact in the game, but they also well-designed monster fill a story in each and a function and bring the game forward. So it's kind of one of these kind of mechanical story parts, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. The artwork does help a lot.
Yeah. Hmm.
So at this point in the early 2000s, did like you just develop a relationship with was Eric was there, correct? Was he Eric was
Eric was doing Living Greyhawk stuff over like on Polyhedron. He was more over on. I never actually met Eric until, well, I may have passed him in the halls. We both started at Wizards of the Coast about the same time.
okay.
But I didn't really start working with him until we were both at Paizo.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's during the Paizo Hawk era then mostly.
Yeah.
Paizo.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
just short
Yeah,
speak.
that's it. We say it in the different ages of the Greyhawk setting, and Paizo Hawk was one era of when,
Mhm.
yeah,
So
when Paizo became the custodians of Dungeon and Dragon magazines and all the stuff that came with it, and the awesome adventure paths and stuff that came, and one of the best maps of Greyhawk ever that
Oh, that
came
four-part.
out.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I tried to chronologically order everything here, and I don't know how well I did on it. So I tried to
Yeah.
get it roughly in the right date. And yeah, there's that map, that four-parter that
Yeah.
was in
Came out,
Dungeons.
what is it, like 2004, 5, something like that, 6 maybe? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember I remember the volumes. It was like Dragon.
Yeah, I think it was
or
something like that because
Dungeon
I've
2018,
started my
1920.
I was started my work on my Greyhawk map for my own campaign like 10 years earlier than that. But then, and when it didn't come out, I was waiting for TSR to release it, and then they got bought up by Wizard of Coast and nothing happened. But then this came out and was like, oh yes, that is so good. So that gave me new fuel to
Yay, cool.
work on it again. Yeah.
Leonard's being, especially
Yeah.
if I use the right word, quiet tonight. So, what do you got,
Yeah.
Leonard? You got a comment or a question for James? He's
And
got a
new
lot of
contest.
stuff.
Yeah.
Because you made up
we're
monsters too.
We're in different eras.
Yeah.
True.
When Gary lost the company, I was persona non grata over at TSR.
Unfortunately.
So
Yeah.
I didn't publish for the Dragon after that.
Yeah, it's
I
a
published
shame.
other places. Published in 5 of the 6 Gygax magazines. It's a
Yeah.
shame the
Oh yeah.
lawyers caught up with them there, but that's
Yeah.
what can you do?
Yeah, and then
You can cease and desist crap.
Len, you had Liamon's not tiny hut, but Liamon's secure shelter, was it, or Liamon's?
Correct.
Yeah, which was cool that you made a change there. So in the early 2000s, I see, and there's some adventures that are really. And let me just go over this one now because we go to 2001. It's up now. We ran this. It was called Lord of the Scarlet Tide. It's adventure number for everyone who knows my numbers. It's 405. Okay, so that's where we are, and this is in 2001. Out of this, and here's the funny thing. This is right out of there you go. My stream just.
Dungeon 34. Okay.
Yeah, dungeon. No, it's not. That's
34.
that is 34
yeah.
monstrous game tokens. It is
Okay,
Dungeon
yeah.
85 to
85,
everyone. Dungeon
okay,
number
yeah.
85. Okay. This is the Poison Well under Narwhal adventure. If you've ever, that leads to the Underdark, basically. James, you remember what your thought process was on this?
It was. I've always really been into the Underdark. I mean, it's just a
Who
weird
isn't?
sort of alien realm,
Yeah.
but it's fun to explore. And the second adventure that I got published way back in 24 was a big Underdark adventure. And so when I came, Lord of the Scarlet Tide was the first time I came back working on adventures after college and moving to Seattle, and just there was about 10 years of other stuff going on.
Oh, okay.
And with Lord of the Scarlet Tide, I just really wanted to do sort of epic, sort of inspired by Descension of the Depths of the Earth style adventure. I mean, it's got that long underground crawl, and then you get to a coast city. So it's very much inspired by those first 2 adventures. So I also wanted to add in a little bit of my own, like just my personal fear of funguses in there.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a connection I love, and you'll know a lot of you will understand why. So if you go to my screen here, I have an NPC that I use that's from the Ashes box set, which James has put in the module, and that's Bladestorm. Okay,
Ah,
I love Bladestorm. I love a
yep.
lot, and you had the foresight to put Bladestorm under in here.
Mhm.
You know, and I loved that she had done that, and that she was actually they recover her if I recall correctly in
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So a little ironies there. The Narwhal map is pretty decent in here too. Whoops, there it is. So you got a
Oh
map
yeah,
of Narwhal. It's pretty
that's the
good.
one that's the official map that I don't know where it came first, but it's
Right.
been the one being. Oh, it's the one from. I think Fate of Istus or something. It's based on that one, and it's been redone many different ways by different artists, but it's the base map that was used for years. Yeah.
This is one of the first times I remember a Chul appearing as well. If you know that
Oh, really?
monster. Yeah, I don't recall. I mean, I'm not sure if there was one earlier, but the
Did
Chul's
you
kind of
invent that? That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
It's there was like a dozen monsters they made up for third edition where they went to Todd and Sam and said just draw us a bunch of monsters and some of them stuck. I mean, the Jewel was one that it's in this sort of niche of power where the players are starting to get water breathing and all that, and it's a great monster to throw at them right when they go into the water and all that. And the
Yeah.
art again, it was just so cool. It's like this carrion crawler lobster thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has a demonic feel
Pictures.
to it too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also in here, you see Dark Mantles, Grix. It's a if you haven't done it, it's against the Koatel a lot, which is really cool. So I just loved it. It was high level, eighth, ninth in that level, and I just wanted to say I've run it, and it's fantastic. So there you go. That's one for the books there, James. It's awesome. So. Do you have like an adventure? I'm going to talk about this next one that's posted because that's got a special circumstance people don't know about. I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about that one. Trust me. But
Okay.
besides
I've
that
never
one,
seen that one before.
oh,
Never
just
seen
wait,
it.
just wait.
Okay,
Yep.
I never
Oh
seen
my
that
gosh!
one, so I
So,
have no clue.
do you have a favorite that you've created?
From all of the D&D era adventures that I did for Dungeon, I think. Oh wow! I think my favorite is the second one I did, Thunder Under Needlespire, which
Oh,
was way back in 24.
okay.
And that was the first one I did, like we mentioned earlier in the stream, was about like a choose your own adventure style thing. But Thunder Under Needlespire was the first run the adventure with players, DM and all that. And it's the one where I invented the mind flayer with 6 tentacles, and it's not really a super creative idea.
Instead of
But
4.
yeah, it ended up really, I guess, resonating, the idea that mind flayers would have this hierarchy. And of course, that's all inspired by Ed Greenland's ecology article way back in Dragon magazine about mind flayers. Maybe there's something leading them.
Yeah.
And that one is
Ah.
really the one that it had just a really cool art on the cover, and that's probably the one that I'm the most proud of on one level. It was the first one, and then the one that I think that I'm well, you just threw up Maury Castle. That's definitely a highlight through the dungeon.
Yeah, and we'll definitely go over that. That's so massive, and the names and that participated in that making of that. We'll find out some details about what you went into. Absolutely. All right, I got one that's not Greyhawk based, and so Gary said, "Hey, get your not Greyhawk stuff out of the way before." And that is, let me go to the end here. But it should be in Greyhawk, and I think a lot of people will place this in Greyhawk. All right, I'm gonna put it. I put it at the very end. So. Red Hand of Doom.
Right.
So that is another fantastic. It's a mega adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one that Rich was working on, and he had it all outlined and was going to write the entire thing. And then, if I remember correctly, there was a down from the top of the mountain at Hasbro that Wizards of the Coast had to do. I think it was it was a board game. I forget what it was. It was like Civilization board, or it was some sort of game that Rich he got taken off Red Hand of Doom, and had to go over. It was Risk. It was a new version of Risk.
Oh, cool.
And so at that point, I'd written a bunch of adventures for, the magazines, and they knew me as, the adventure guy, and they were sort of in a panic mode because they didn't have anybody to write that adventure. So they came to me and asked me Rich came to me and said, do you want to write the last 3/3 of this, the last 75% of this adventure? I've got it all outlined. All I have to do is finish up the parts that aren't written yet, which is most of it. But so yeah, sure, absolutely. So that one was a really it wasn't a plot that I came up with, but being able to work with Rich and take what he'd started, he did everything pretty much up through, like, I think it was the Hydra fight in the swamp was about where he got taken off the project. And they really let me kind of go my own direction in a couple places with like a lich druid that was kind of weird and some other stuff.
Well, according to Asher and a lot of others, this got adapted into Living Greyhawk in the Shieldlands, right? The Red Hand is correct, Anna?
Well, it's kind of it was interesting because when it came out, a lot of people like saw the map and saw that some of the names. Oh, we can kind of tweak it into Greyhawk if you move the map, turn the map 90 degrees, and squeeze it and massage it a bit, and change some of the name. So I actually took, but I think it's in Steric. That is the southern Steric. I kind of adjusted the map a bit to fit the Red Hand of Doom map. So some of the stuff is moved around a little bit on my Flanese map to be, so if you take the Red Hand of Doom map and move it 90 degrees and squeeze it or drag it, I forgot which one, that way you can actually put the adventure locations and it will fit in, so to speak. So if you want to run the Red Hand of Doom, I've just looked at the map and read some, I have the adventure somewhere in the shelves, but I've never used it as an adventure, which is kind of typical me. I buy all the adventures and I read through them probably more often than most people do, and take locations and stuff and kind of put them on my map making. And I've done it now for several other game settings too, that I've been part of mapping team. But it was part of it, but it was, so I don't know exactly how well story wise it would fit in that area, but that was what I was being told was supposed to do. So yeah.
Mark Creative Mountain Game says Red Hand is my pick for best WotC adventure during the 3X era. That's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
That
so is awesome. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Absolutely. Yeah. So Lynn, you got a lot of content we're going over. I know you don't, but you made some monsters yourself. The Spectator is yours. The Stone Guardian is yours. A lot of things. So
I've created a bunch of monsters over the years, God knows. A lot of it is, some of it's published, some of it isn't.
Yep.
But many of them have been. I always add something new to everything I do if I possibly can. Something that didn't exist before. So I did that in Footprints. I did a number of them in there. And
L4 and L5.
And then in various groups on Facebook. I've created stuff there. I just sent you the ship, by the way.
Thank you.
You and Anna.
Awesome. I'll definitely take a look at it and download it.
And then I did that on Undead today. I had nothing better to do, so I did an Undead. Well, they had what's his name?
That's cool.
Mick Leach produced a picture of a wizard who was undead, and he had kind of his claws up. And I said, well, that needs to be taken care of. And so I went through and statted that up. And that's the one that both of you said you'd seen earlier today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah,
we saw that on that's awesome. That getting new stuff, still new content, even from Leonard today is fantastic. So, James, a question out here from Mark. Greyhawk was default setting during 3XE. Does that mean any new 3E monsters will also default Greyhawk at that time? What do you think about that?
At the outset of 3E, I don't think so. A lot of those monsters that they created for the third edition monster manual was really stuff that they wanted to be world neutral, I guess.
Okay.
But it's also the case where it's like, even if you're building something world neutral, you have to have some sort of DNA of a world to build off of. And so they weren't officially like the Chul and the Yurthak and the Arrowhawk and all this weren't officially Greyhawk monsters, but
Okay.
you could look at some, I mean, you can look at just like the design philosophy for something like the Arrowhawk or the Yurthak is a little bit more kind of, they feel more Forgotten Realms to me, but the Chul feels more like pulpy. And so you can kind of see those strands of inspiration, even through monsters like that.
Yeah, I was just when I said that earlier, it was the first time I ever remember seeing it. The Jewel, and it was your adventure there. So it's really a good thing. Oh my gosh, I am such an idiot. I have the article right here, Beast of the Palm.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
So we have the Grimoirian.
Yep.
Okay, Grimoirian. All right.
I especially love the art, the skitter maw.
Racknackle. Yep.
Yeah.
Racknackle. Right.
That's
Scareth.
Yeah.
And then the Skittermaw.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's 4. Very, very cool. I can't believe I printed that one out, and I was sitting on it that whole time during the discussion. Sorry about that, but yeah. So we have, and I guarantee you, through all these bestiaries and Demonicons. So if we go a little bit forward here, yeah, I wasn't sure about Living Greyhawk, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
Headless is another adventure that comes up in Dungeon Magazine that I contemplated running it because if I recall, it's pretty high level. Can you give us some of your thoughts on this one that you wrote as well?
That was the first adventure that I got assigned rather than something I came up with. It was Chris Perkins had the idea. It's like, I have this cool name for an adventure called Headless, and it's about somebody who headhunts or something like that. And he just had the title, and they needed, I think it was something for that around that level band, kind of mid-high level. And he came over to my cubicle or emailed or however it was, and just asked if I wanted to do it. And at that point, I was like, yes, anything. So
cool. Yeah.
I got a lot of leeway into how to figure out how to justify the title, and I didn't get really in trouble, but I think I got the magazine department in a little bit of trouble by putting stats for Orcus in there, because the design team at that point for 3rd edition didn't quite know how they wanted to do demon lords and really high level.
Oh, that was still the aftermath of when they were called Batisus and Tenaris. And
it was they were already calling. It was more the question of like, once you get to a certain power level, the rules start getting a little bit, stretched thin.
Yeah.
And they hadn't quite figured out, because they were still working on deities and demigods, and so it kind of stepped on their toes a little bit. I had assumed that the periodicals department and the R&D department were talking back and forth, but not always the case. So, but yeah, that was a fun one to do up.
Yeah. Playing
around with that simulacrum spell.
Yeah, absolutely. That one was one that how you this is what I used to do. I don't know if you used to do this when you were DMing, but when you were younger, you go through all the publications. There's some in the dungeon, a lot in the dungeon, but there's some in the dragon, and you try and put them out where you're going to do them because they're so good, and then you can never get to all of them, right? And that's I think where Headless has been with me was right there. It's really a good one. It's just you got to get the right place and the right time for it. Mm-hmm. So all right. Let's talk about this. That's actually this one is early on, and it's in I think Dungeon 95. Is that Porphyry?
Yep.
How? All right. Yeah, in 2002, you decide whose idea was this, because this is like cutting edge. In this dungeon, this has something crazy.
So before I get into the crazy part of it, I just wanted to thank. Thank you, Leonard, for the Lendor Isles and all of that.
There you go.
Just the way that adventure, that one in Hamlet, really, the idea that there's a small town and there's like a dungeon on the outskirts, that is, I think, just the purest form of starting a campaign. And it's something that I've always whenever I start a new campaign, it's always like I want to make a new village for people to start in, and then there's a
Yeah.
place around them to explore and just let them
Yep.
go. It's just the perfect way to start a campaign. And it's something that just keeps coming back in adventures I write, like with this one, for example, where it's a town and there's a dungeon in the town, but that's about where all of that inspiration kind of stops, because so at about this time, Wizards of the Coast was doing this sort of, I guess I would call it an experiment with the Book of Wild Darkness, a full-on mature,
Yeah.
adults only rules expansion for Dungeons and Dragons. And I wasn't involved in the decisions why they wanted to do this or how it was built up, but they did want to support it in Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine with an adventure and articles. And so I think it was Chris Thompson or Chris Perkins. I think it was Chris Thompson at the time. Chris Young's now. And came to me and asked, can you do a mature content adventure? And I was like, yes. How over the top can I get? And he said, just go as far as you can, and we'll cut back the parts that are too much. So, yeah, that was.
That's not every day you get that request in the gaming business.
No, it's the only time that I've been involved with something like that, where it's like we're specifically going against the idea that, I mean, third edition had already sort of pushed back against, the sanitization, I guess, of a lot of the content that happened in late second edition.
Yeah.
And with bringing back the assassin and stuff like that.
Oh.
And then the Book of Wild Darkness was just pushing it the other direction. And so, yeah, that adventure, I mean, that cover you've got up there now, that woman sitting on what looks like a giant block of cheese, was I believe that the original cover that they had for that adventure either was just too over the top or it came in way too late, and they had to upgrade a smaller, like a half-page illustration or something to the cover or something like that. That was like about half a year before I started at Paizo. But yeah, that was an interesting adventure to write, simply because it's just so filled with just awful, gross, in some cases immature, in other cases just, just try anything and just,
So
definitely notorious, that's for sure.
It's a cult classic actually out there. So if you don't know, it takes place in Scuttle Cove. This is where Scuttle Cove gets placed, right? Scuttle Cove was your idea completely?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and is Sassarine your idea completely as well?
Scuttle Cove is from my homebrew. So this idea of like a sleazy, gross pirate city, I kind of pulled out of my homebrew and sort of exported it in here, changed names and all that stuff. Sassarine was Chris Perkins.
Okay.
Okay. That was a lot of Sassarine was done in Savage Tide. So once we got to actually mapping it out and stuff, that was more me and some other authors that I brought in to help out.
I think it's a fantastic Sassarine, and the whole area down there is a wonderful addition to the old traditional classic Greyhawk, and you took a new area and put something in that I think fits perfectly with the rest of the setting, and it's an addition to it. So yeah, I think it's a perfect example of how you can expand the setting without making anything obsolete that used to be there, and you just add to it. So yeah.
This one's so bad. And it says the Port of Scuttle Cove, and I'm not talking about in a bad. I'm talking about this is a bad adventure for bad people. The Port of Scuttle Cove is a weeping wound of evil and depravity lurking in the filth is horror beyond imagination. Just to synopsize it, there's bad people trying to eliminate other bad things, and there's just backstabbing and just it's cutthroat, and it is. This is from my friend Dungeon Meister, who actually has a picture at the end of his Porphyry House Horror. That picture right there is done by Dungeon Meister in 2017. With yes, I'll probably get a 30-day for that picture, but that's okay on Twitch. That's art. So and you can see there's a lot of slaughtered things there in that adventure. It definitely was a really, really. Man, and that was it. After that, there was no more. What did they think about the Book of Wild Darkness and all that was going around? They said it's too cutting edge.
Well, so the Book of Wild Darkness came out, and it kind of ruffled feathers here and there. We got a lot of the magazine's got a fair amount of backlash with it, and of course, controversy is good for magazine business.
Mhm.
But it was, as far as I remember, Book of Wild Darkness did well enough that they went on with the inverse of that, the good guy book,
Exalted Deeds.
Book of
it was
Yep.
Exalted, which
Yep.
also was mature, but was not, it was mature in another direction.
Yeah, I think it's some of the
And-
best that was published. I think
Yeah.
it's awesome. Yeah.
And then they were going to do something called, I think, I don't want to call it, it's not Sin City, or City of Sin was a big kind of city supplement, I think, that they were going to work
Yeah.
on, and it was going to incorporate, it would be a setting for the Book of Wild Darkness, the Book of Exalted Deeds. And it's about that point that I think they started, some of the third-party publishers started coming out with like the Book of Erotic Fantasy and a couple of other things, and some customers didn't realize that these other books were published by other publishers, and they called Hasbro, and
Also, that was
It
so
was-
late.
it
I
was
thought
sort
that
of a-
was earlier. So okay.
it was sort of a kind of a backlash, and it kind of had
Yeah.
everybody pulling back from just
Mhm.
that direction, which honestly is probably for the best of the
I
brand.
think so.
suppose.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the Vile Darkness and the Exalted Deed are really great books, but in my opinion, you shouldn't push it any further than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's definitely something that it minimizes the number of people who can enjoy the game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Len, what's the worst thing you've ever put into an adventure or a setting?
Well,
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
good question. I can, you ran into trouble with the people on the, whatever the hell was it, the 400 Club or the 800 Club, holding up pictures of the Monster Manual and not
Yeah,
the Monster
in
Manual,
the 80s.
the Player's Handbook and
And
the
the Dungeon
DMG
Master's Guide.
saying, it's evil and this, that, and the other thing. And you also ran into problems if you decide to put a House of Ill Repute in something, because 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds were buying you stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
You didn't have to show an ID to be able to buy a modern. So if it had that in it, there you went. When I went to a convention in Portland, Maine, or Oregon, and I was supposed to run a bunch of games, 8 or 9 or 10 games, and someone let something slip, and I ended up with a bunch of boys between 11 and 15. And I went, oh, this is going to be rough.
Oh no!
This is going to be rough, because you had to go into a whorehouse at one point and get information. And for adults, they would cope with it. But you got a bunch of kids that are going, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they came up to me afterwards and said, we're sorry we sent all those kids to you. I said, well, we got through it. In fact, one of the kids, I literally chased through the ballroom to touch him with a spell. I got a few points of interest from that. I was jumping over people and he was jumping over people. And I caught up with him.
Wow.
And that involved, it's a little rough. If you make a misstep and crush somebody's spine, it wouldn't be very good either.
Oh my gosh, Len.
Oh.
But,
That's the
my favorite was when I was a dungeon mastering the Neistel family. Brian Neistel was like 11 or 12, and the town we were in, which is not any of the ones that are in L1 through 5, it was one of the other ones. It had a House of Ill Repute in it. And he goes in to get information because he's been told this is where it is. And his mother is sitting there looking daggers at him,
Uh-oh.
figuring that,
Yep.
any minute now, this is going to go bad. This is going to go south.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
afterwards, I said, he got the information. He had a lot of fun. That was it.
Yeah, but I think that was a perfect example of, even if an adventure is written somewhere or you planned something, if something like that comes up, you just change it on the fly and wing it. And
You can do that too. You can
Yeah,
do that
yeah,
too.
I
But
would just, yeah, if
he was the one the party had split up. You know, God forbid they do that, but
Yeah.
they
Oh,
did.
Ever split
And they were having different people do different parts. And he got assigned going to this place, which had some name to it that didn't necessarily imply
Yeah.
that it was a whorehouse.
Yeah. Can you?
But he went in, and I went, "Oh, this is going to go bad.
Yeah.
This could be unfortunate."
So the funny thing is that Judges Guild never worried about that stuff in the early
No.
70s. They were all over the place in the Judges Guild content,
Yeah.
you know, back in the day. So pretty funny story.
Dungeons Guild started producing stuff at Gen Con 3, 4, or 5, I think.
Yeah,
They had a table with a few adventures, and Gygax was amazed that people were hungry for adventure, and it opened that door because they were successful. They were selling us stuff like there was no tomorrow, and there were some pretty crappy ones too.
Yeah, Operation Ogre.
But the point was, you didn't have to design it yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people weren't up for designing it themselves. They wanted someone else to do it. So they were eager to find stuff that was already pre-published and ready to go.
Yeah.
Very funny story, Lynn. Absolutely. Well,
so, just one quick thing.
Sure.
I've only heard from one person on doing the
your contest.
The tarot cards. I don't know if if anything is going to happen with that.
All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to relink the email into the Discords of Greyhawk Online and Cannon Fire when we're done tonight. It's 7 cards of a tarot deck for like a deck of many things. Okay, I'll relink it at the end of the night as well. Okay, I will do that.
One guy sent me some stuff, but he was throwing cards on the floor and doing strange things, and I wrote him back and said, no. You don't take away something that might give you a full wish and throw it on the floor. No, don't do that.
Well, you're playing it. We got to lean him against the wall. I guess he was doing that too, right?
No.
Awesome, Lynn. Awesome. So, good.
Well, the Neisel family was renowned for, if they hit a deck at least three times, in different situations, different modules. And the boys, Mike and Brian, would pick as many cards as they could possibly pick. And
oh man,
Mom and Dad, maybe for one of their 2 or 3 characters, might pick one. They were very conservative. But the boys wouldn't. They would wait until somebody got blown away. And then they go, oh, hell, yeah, well, you pick the first one, you pick the second one, now you pick the third one. And I like the deck with 26 cards in it, the Major Arcana and the 4 Aces. That's the one I use the most often.
The older you get,
themselves away. It was marvelous to watch.
The older you get with a deck of many things and stuff like that, the less you draw. Trust me. The Monty Hall days, you're like, I'll take 4. But I'll take.
I love drawing those things. I'm on the side of like, I'll take 7.
It's black.
You can also do a deck that says you only pick a second card when the card tells you to pick a second card. Otherwise, don't even think of picking up a second.
Yeah,
you're in deep trouble if you do that. But you have to specify that in the deck that you do.
Those decks can ruin many a character.
Oh yeah,
but I like the freedom that you kind of you put the gambler in the player, saying how many cards do you dare to draw, and you entice them with riches and stuff, and then they can end up in.
That's why I started doing the deck, saying that the only time you get to pick a second card is when the deck tells you.
Yeah.
Pick a second card, and it wasn't in. There were cases where it was optional. You may pick a second card. And there are other cases where take another card now. And you were forced to take it, whether you liked it or not. It got interesting. And then, of course, you had 1 or 2 cards that would make the entire deck vanish. And there's the poor guy sitting in the corner saying, but I haven't gotten my card yet.
Yeah. So
See,
sometimes that can really throw a curveball into an
aggravating.
entire campaign. That's why I don't give them out. I think I've given one out in 15, 20 years just because of that. So Len, I know you're going to be we're going to do evil deities on Legends and Lore on Wednesday and talk about your soul evil deities, which will be good with all the other
There's
ones.
three major ones.
Yeah, we're going to deep
And
delve.
then, of course, Ouija is partially evil, but what I keep trying to say to people is Ouija is there to protect the dead, the people who've been put in graves, not necessarily raise them. Her clergy are almost never given permission to raise people from the dead. That isn't her thing.
Well, Len, I appreciate you always. I know you'll be off in like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, just a few minutes.
As usual, but I really appreciate the input on this. Let's go to what I've had up. This massive Mark Castle.
Oh, yes.
James, what do you think? I mean, it says on the front here by Robert Kuntz and Gary Gygax, but you got a lot of credit in this.
Well, it's so we Eric and I early on once we started putting our heads together for Dungeon Magazine and wanted to get more Greyhawk in there. We wanted to do at some point a special issue of Dungeon. It was just one adventure all the way from the start to finish. And it was a little bit of a risky, stunt because up until that point, Dungeon's strength was there's multiple adventures. So no matter what level game you're running, there's always something to do. So we wanted to do something that we knew people were already interested in. And the original attempt was we were going to do a revisitation of Expedition to Barrier Peaks and Dungeon, so like an entire volume. And we quickly abandoned that because we couldn't do it in the size of a magazine.
No,
there was just so much going on there.
And this is the days before adventure paths and stuff were really a feature, so to speak. Yeah.
No, I think we'd already had the Shackled City one was going.
Okay.
But it was before they really started picking up. But so we moved on to Maury Castle because it's the classic, dungeon, like Mordenkainen's Fantastic Adventure is just a classic dungeon crawl type thing. And it was really, I think Eric went ahead and got Gary and Robert and everybody to just come back and do more content for it. So a lot of what they did is they wrote up the new stuff. We took the original adventure and then Robert did that 4th level. And then what Eric and I did is we went through it and touched things up and made sure there was going through the 3rd edition rules and all that. And that was the first time that I had really worked with, a lot of the people who had, created the game that I grew up playing. And so it was sort of, it's just a career highlight to be able to find out, hear all the stories about the first time going through like dungeons and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun to put together.
A lot of great artifacts in here. A lot of great, monsters in here. The Nabasu's in here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that I did a fair amount of with there was a lot of in 3rd edition this idea of like making new monsters up, and I understand you want to make new things up, but I just there's so many great monsters from the early days that I just kept trying to find ways to get them back in there, like the Nabasu and the Frog Hemoth and
yeah. Tierg is in here too.
Yep.
So here comes Gary. Exit stage Len, enter stage Gary Julian.
Okay, awesome. Yep.
He's connecting the audio. Gary will be some kind of picture of something. Gary, we will see that. Did you ever do any work with Gary or any discussions with Gary, James, when during that great talk there?
On and off. Mostly through the magazines. I'm trying to think of stuff. I don't know. There's been so much going on that, and that all those years of doing all of the dungeon, all the adventures and everything like that. But yeah, I definitely know. I know who Gary is for sure.
Awesome, Gary. Welcome.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Oh, you're Isle of Dread today.
Yeah.
It's great to have James on.
Yeah, Isle of Dread, of course.
I mean, he's probably edited almost everything I did in the 2000s, if not him, Eric. But
it's awesome. We just were talking about Moore Castle. That's where we got to the time frame, Gary. So I know you probably got a ton of questions. Why don't you throw one out there, and we'll just keep on. We'll keep this thing flowing. How's that sound?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, James. So it seems like, of course, Eric always had an interest in the old setting and a lot of the old characters and NPCs. To what extent were you into that too, and bringing them back in the pages of Dragon and Dungeon?
Equal, pretty much. Eric had, of course, a lot more of a public interact with that because he had been so deeply involved with Living Greyhawk. That's like we mentioned earlier in the thing in the stream that I never really got into the organized play or the massive multiplayer element of it. I sort of I prefer just smaller games, but yeah, I'm definitely was there with Eric trying to figure out who to like is Tasha and Abel, was that the same person, and just all this like piecing like I guess RPG archaeology is what it is. You look through all of these adventures and tidbits and things in here and there, and piecing together connections where maybe there were none, maybe there were.
We also compare it to Talmudic scholarship.
Yeah.
We're trying to divine the intent of people who may have not had any intent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I remember working with on Moore Castle with Rob Kuntz and going back and forth because he had this one of his philosophies is that you need to have emptied rooms in the dungeon so that the player characters are never going to be sure if that room is empty or if it's just got invisible things in it. And my philosophy was that if we're going to spend time talking about a room, it has to have something in there, even if it looks empty. So he and I had like this back and forth about whether or not there was going to be empty rooms in Moore Castle. And I think I eventually let some of those empty rooms stay in there, but it was just so tough for me to let them go. But it's the sort of thing that I would start asking him, like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? And he, in some cases, was very forthcoming. So, oh, that was my character, and that's what happened when we played through. But in other cases, it's like there's a recurring element in the Moore Castle adventures of somebody named Y, and like Y, this mysterious patron or element or something like that. And I, for a long time, thought it was Yunaghu, the demon lord of Knowles, and Robert said, nope, that's not who it is. And he never told me who Y is.
So, to this day, you don't know.
Nah, still don't know.
Oh man,
I should.
It could be Yogg Sothoth. It could be Urag. It could be
Zyger and Yagarini.
Yeah. Yep.
Who knows, right? Oh wow.
Yep.
And to a certain extent, not knowing is better. I mean, that's something we've done in Galarian. Is this one of the major elements of Galarian is that the god of humanity died, rather than coming back when it was prophesied he would come back. And it's this ongoing mystery. Why did this god Eredin die? And it's not something we're ever going to reveal, because once you reveal the mystery, people lose interest.
There goes the allure.
Just look at how the decline of popularity of Lost once that last episode aired.
Yeah.
James, Shackled City, was your thought process on that like it was supposed to be setting neutral, and then they decided, hey, this fits right here in Greyhawk? What was it? What do you think on?
So the thought process for Shackled City was sort of an experiment. Chris Perkins, I think, was the one that came up with the idea. I think it started before I worked at Paizo on magazines. And the idea was that they wanted to do an adventure path where you start at first level and you go as far as you can. And Chris wrote the first adventure and then I wrote the second one. He gave me the adventure to read, and then I wrote the next adventure, and then I finished that and gave it to David Noonan to write the third adventure. And so it was more of an exquisite works type thing where there was no overall plot. I mean, the city was set inside of a volcano, so you knew eventually the volcano was probably going to explode. But you didn't really have a plot. It's kind of like every person who took the next adventure up started a new direction and did new things. And by the time that we got into the second half of it, I was on the staff, and Eric and I realized this needs to have a resolution. This needs to get tied together. So that was sort of really tricky, trying to figure out how to tie a bunch of the earlier adventures together into something that made it look like we knew where we were going the whole time, which we didn't.
And the early adventures were already published in Dungeon magazine.
Right.
Yeah.
So who put it in Greyhawk?
Let me see. I don't think so. The first adventure came out, and that was just a big, dungeon crawl inside of Cauldron. And then the second adventure got assigned to me, and Chris Perkins said, we needed to have wilderness. That's part of your job, James, is to do the wilderness around it. So I drew that map that ended up getting published in that volume of the region surrounding Cauldron.
This
Oh, you
volume.
have that?
Yeah.
Oh, Lanny, you have that hardback? Oh, man.
Yep. Oh yeah, I have that.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
How much?
But so then Sasserine was like mentioned as like the city, the big city down on the coast, but you never really go there in Shackled City.
I'm going to go to a map here.
Yep.
I think that I don't think we actually set Cauldron and Sasserine in Greyhawk until Shackled City was over and done with.
There we go.
Got to, we got to this one. We got to Savage Tide.
Yeah, because I don't think Greyhawk is mentioned here at all.
It's very much a case where it's like they wanted this to be, again, a world neutral thing so that anybody could run it. But then when we did, of course, the next one, which I assume we'll get to Age of Worms.
Yes.
That is and I've got stories about that.
Awesome.
That one is very much set in Greyhawk. And it was even more popular than Shackled City. So when we got to the third one, we decided that at that point we wanted to bring the first adventure path into Greyhawk, and it was that point where we kind of snuck it into the jungle, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Maybe something a little bit earlier.
Yeah, but by placing it in the corner that you guys did, you did both things a favor. You didn't interfere with the existing campaign very much, but you also kind of snuck it in right on the edge of the map so that it could have plausibly have been there all the entire time.
Yeah, that was very, very much by design. We wanted it to be somewhere that exactly that. It could have been there the whole time. Nobody just noticed because that's the jungle and it's a scary place.
Very cool. Okay, Gary. I know you got a ton.
I do, but I guess we're bouncing all around. I guess we should just go with the adventure paths since we're already there. So was Eric Mona already on board by the time the second adventure path had been decided?
Oh yeah, Eric was one of the he was in the periodicals department at Wizards, and when they spun off Paizo, Eric was one of the exports from Wizards of the Coast. So Eric's been at Paizo from day one. I joined Paizo on day 367, like 1 year later.
Yeah.
But so Eric was definitely on board as working on the polyhedron side of things, and then took over Dungeon Magazine at about the point where Shackled City was. I forget exactly where the transfer happened over, but definitely Age of Worms was pretty much 100% Eric just doing what Eric does and building that an amazing campaign. And the original plan for Age of Worms was it was going to run 20 adventures. Each adventure was going to be one level, and it was going to go every single volume because we kept getting feedback from people saying, I love the adventure path. I love the adventure path. I only ever buy the volumes with the adventure paths in it. And our reply was, well, we want you to buy every volume, so we're just going to do an adventure path in every volume. So
that's around the same time that the dungeon went monthly, right?
Yep, it was about the same time, and it was a combination of Dungeon Go monthly. It was really the adventure path concept and the promise to have 3 adventures for low, medium, and high. I think that got Dungeon back on its feet, because there was a point where it was going to go away because it was just not doing that well.
Yeah, and also you oh, sorry.
Oh, just those 2 changes saved the magazine.
Yeah, and also you ran player companion and background articles in Dragon parallel to it that I think was awesome because they gave the context to the adventure, so to speak.
And it made it so that if you read one, you're like, oh, what's in the other one? You have to buy both.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whose idea was it? Was it yours, James, about the enhanced Dungeons downloads?
That was probably Eric's idea. And it's not something. The idea it's not something that we came up with beforehand. It was something we came up with after when we realized we had an extra 20,000 words, and we had to. It was either throw them online as enhanced PDFs or something like that, or just throw them away. So
Thank God you guys didn't do that.
yeah,
No.
It's
it
wonderful.
gave us a lot more work, but I think it was definitely worth it. The original adventure path outline for Age of Worms, again, it was 20 adventures. We went to Wizards of the Coast and had them, they had to approve everything in the magazines. And
20.
they had 2 bits of advice that really shaped what Age of Worms ended up being. And one of them, I think, was crucial and is what made it so successful. The other one is maybe not the best advice. But the first one was, they said, this can't go on for 20 volumes. It's got to be shorter. It's maybe a year. That's very powerful. It's like, this is a year-long adventure path, 12 volumes. And that way, if it wasn't popular, you wouldn't lose steam. If it went, people would lose interest if it goes on too long. It just outgrows its welcome. And that also allowed us to, instead of doing shorter adventures, do larger adventures that were 1 to 2 to 3 levels, depending upon which one. And I think that ended up making the whole thing just so much more robust and interesting. And the other one was that they were still, Wizards of the Coast was still really pretty timid about the idea of banking that much of the magazine, at 1/3 of the magazine for a year with one campaign setting, because there was this perception that if you play a game in campaign setting A, you wouldn't want to do anything in campaign setting A, which is, I know myself, I've been putting Forgotten Realms stuff and Greyhawk stuff and Lankmar stuff and Judges Guild stuff into my homebrew, the whole time. That's how everybody plays it. They just grab stuff. But
Yeah, and they themselves were putting all the gods in the core. So
yes, yeah. So it was a weird sort of, we were trying to second guess them and all that, and went back and forth. And we ended up being able to set it all in Greyhawk, but we couldn't use 3 names we couldn't use. We couldn't use Tensor, we couldn't use Bucknard, and we couldn't use Greyhawk. So
interesting.
that's why Tensor got renamed in there to what was it? Manzorian or Balakard?
Manzorian, yeah.
And then Bucknard got renamed to Balakard, I think. And
So
then Greyhawk, we just called Greyhawk the Free City. So the word
you
Greyhawk
could use
never
Morden.
appeared.
You could use Mordenkainen, but you couldn't use Tensor.
I don't think Mordenkainen showed up in the outline.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why that kind of slipped through the cracks. But we could, you could use stuff like Wormcrawl Fissure or Diamond Lake, all of this other stuff that is absolutely from Greyhawk. It was fine, but those, I think,
That's weird.
it's because Bucknard and Tensor appeared in names of spells and magic items that the perception was it was too famous.
But Mordenkainen
Greyhawk,
was
of course,
okay.
they didn't want people. Yeah, it's strange, but so we're
Wow.
all right. Well, you guys own it, so we have to do what you say. Thank you for letting us play with your stuff. But
It looks like Eric was conducting a lot of civil disobedience.
Oh my
there's
gosh.
sort of a little bit of civil disobedience, but also respect at the same time, because it's a case where it's like you don't own any of this stuff, and you get just being able to do an entire adventure where you explore all of this different like you mentioned White Plume Mountain at the start. That's one of the most foundational things in my head from gaming is that first map of White Plume Mountain, Thin Gizzard's Hut and Drygotha, which you've got up on the screen. Those elements were so formative to me that I just really wanted to dive in and expand on them, explore them, and then add new questions in. So
yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe they were fearing that you guys would devalue those properties in some ways, but on the it was quite the contrary. I think you were, extending their depth, creating more material for them to use later. But
I don't know if there's also this element of you're proud of the stuff that you created. So if you create new content, that's something that, I mean, I've seen this right now with Pathfinder. The stuff that you created is you're more invested in. And as you keep working in the industry, you want to expand on that more and more. And there's also the element of, this sort of a fear. Eric and I had a lot of just deep background historical knowledge about Greyhawk, about just like all of this different, like Thin Gizzard. Not everybody involved in D&D knows who Thin Gizzard was. But since there was this whole change from TSR to Wizards of the Coast, and then they were pushing Forgotten Realms, it's a case where I think they may have been a little nervous about doing Greyhawk stuff and then getting called out for doing it wrong, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Man.
I don't know. But
So whose idea was it to have Caius as the big bad of this new adventure path?
so one of the fun things about working in a place like Paizo is 10 years later, you can't remember who came up with what idea. I
Yep.
think it was me. I
Okay.
think because the son of Caius was my favorite monster in the Fiend Folio. Just this idea of these worms that
Yeah.
turn you into. I've always been fascinated by parasites turning people into monsters. It's
Yeah.
alien. It's like William Hope Hodgson's story, The Voice in the Night, which is where my fear of mushrooms came from. It's just that sort of idea that something in nature can get into you and turn you into something awful.
Yeah, like John
With a worm.
Carpenter's The Thing. Yeah.
The Thing, my favorite movie.
Really? There you go.
Or
Wow.
Alien, my favorite movie, The Thing. Anyway, so I've always been a fan of this son of Caius, and always been intrigued by the fact that nobody ever said what Caius was in the Fiend Folio. It was just somebody.
Yeah.
You know, obviously somebody had these weird worm creatures. So it was something that I'd always been intrigued by, and I don't know if it was me pushing Eric to make Caius the main bad guy, or if Eric came up with the idea and I was like, yes, do it. So it's probably the Eric James. We sort of have like 98% of the same brain, but we diverge. You know, when it gets into Doctor Who, I don't know what he's talking about. When it gets into Godzilla,
It's like McCartney, Lennon almost, right?
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So you did the Ecology of the Spawn of Caius, Dragon 336, everyone. That is, you did an entire article on that. So,
Yep.
which is fantastic. Wormcrawl Fissure is your adventure in the Age of Worms path, and what sticks out to you about your contribution to it?
So one of the things when you're working on something like this, you get to put your marker on which one you want to do. Eric wanted to do the first one. I wanted to do the one with Dragotha. And so Wormcrawl Fissure is something that first showed up in, it wasn't City of Skulls. It was, or was it? It was one of those.
Use the Evil, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. There was just this couple of paragraphs about it. It may have just been the From the Ashes box set, now that I think about it. It had a couple of paragraphs about the Wormcrawl Fissure. And I've always, like I was saying, worms are creepy and intriguing because they're gross and weird. Caius is filled with worms, so Wormcrawl Fissure
Yeah.
feels like it's got. I don't remember if that was something that was mentioned in the text or something like that, but yeah, that was something that I'd always wanted to just explore more of, like explore Caius and explore Dragotha and the Wormclaw Fissure, and also being able to figure out who made the Thessal Hydra was a big kind of fun part for me.
That's a Fiend
another
Folio
case
as
you got
well.
the Thessal Hydra. Somebody's got to be named Thessal to make a Hydra named Thessal Hydra.
Yeah.
I thought it was great that you guys didn't reach for like the most convenient villains, of the setting, and that you guys kind of opened up a new territory for people.
Yeah, I mean, it's really even the idea that the main bad guy in this is like a giant worm man. That it's not the first type of thing you would think of, but when you hear the word Age of Worms in a Dungeons and Dragons sort of thing, and we still get people to this day asking why is there not more dragons, because it's called Age of Worms. Look the way it's spelled. That's
Yeah.
an O,
It's not
not a Y.
worms.
Yeah.
But it's very much sort of a play on that whole thing, where it's like, if you hear it and you know it's D&D, it's sort of a kind of like a legerdemain sort of distraction. You think it's about dragons, but no, it's about something gross. And there's dragons in it. Dragotha's a dragon.
Yeah.
Lashana's a dragon. I don't want to spoil too much. I mean, it's been 20 years, but
Yeah, but it might be some. Well, among the audience here, most people have played it or read it or so. Yeah.
So,
and one of the things, actually, I think that it's again comes back to the art. As much fun and as much attention to detail Eric and I and the authors put into this adventure path, getting Wayne Reynolds to illustrate the first volume with and design Caius, getting Eva Witterman to do pretty much all of the body shots. The name of the artist who did the full page openers, escapes me off the top of my head, but it has like this sort of almost surreal look to them, like very painterly look to them that makes it look almost apocalyptic. And it just really, really is so important to, when you pick up an adventure and you see a great piece of art, it just inspires. It's
Yep.
just so important. I mean, they say, you know, the whole story about the picture's worth 1,000 words. I mean, I think you could think of it as a picture's worth 1,000 ideas. And you see one piece of art, and as a GM, you're like, oh, this is, I can do an entire campaign on one picture.
So, great, Christoph, Christoph Nolan, who is the Earth Journal editor now. I'm not sure if you've ever talked to Christoph, but he has a question about. I hope I pronounced this right. Tyra Landy Scrim
Landy Scrim,
and the Green Lady vestige you created.
So, back when we were talking about Porphyry House Horror, there is a villain in that named Tyralandy, who's, I think, a half-fiend nymph.
Yes.
And
I have a picture of her. Okay.
Yep. And so whenever that's what I was saying, also is like reusing names. Like the last, and the first thing I published in Scepter Knife ends up being a Rune Lord. I just keep reusing names. So when Eric wanted to run Age of Worms, I was like, I want to do a creepy goth worshiper of the goddess of death, and not necessarily be a good person, but not a bad person. So for that game that he ran, that's where I decided to reuse the name Tyralandy, because that already sort of sounds kind of weird and creepy. And a lot of the way Eric runs his games is he sets up a bunch of just like little bits and pieces of like lore that you can pick up on, but he also expects the players to introduce their own stuff. So that's sort of where I came up with the Green Lady vestige for Tyralandy in his game. Was I wanted to be one of Tyralandy's backstory things was, here I am, let me tell you about my character. And so she was born dead and then got resurrected as a baby, and then growing up had like this ability that, you know, she gets hurt by positive energy, healed by negative energy. And so the Green Lady was sort of this idea of like, I wanted to have her worship some sort of weird version of the deity. And not necessarily the one that everybody knew about, so it would be a little bit creepy. And so the Green Lady was sort of like this element of like, she's still the goddess of death and magic, but more of like on the sort of the nature side rather than the necromancy side of things. So,
Okay.
and then what I do is I do some of that, come up with a little bit of it, and then just let Eric take over. So Eric is responsible for a lot of that stuff as I am.
It's awesome. It's really cool to hear the story about it too. So thank Christoph.
Yeah,
That was a great question, Christoph.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you guys play test it internally? Did you guys run the campaign?
No, the publishing schedule for the adventures in Dungeon were so go. We didn't really have any time to play test anything. That was the job of the adventure author. So Eric certainly play tested his adventure to a certain extent, but the amount of time it takes to play through an adventure is longer than the amount. We eventually, you know, fell way behind in our campaign running through it. So part of the job of a developer as well is sort of, even though you're not playing through it, when you're reading through it and making sure that the voice and the language and the rules are all right, you're sort of playtesting it in your mind. And that's sort of a Band-Aid, as it were, over the fact that we didn't have time to play test it, but we do have time to go through it and revise and expand and all of that.
So, Age of Worms was like it sounds like it was like a home run. And then
Joaquin Barham, thank you
Yep.
for the call out for the author
Yep.
or the artist who did the great openers for Age of Worms.
So James, did you guys have metrics that told you how successful it was, or feedback?
We had the subscription numbers, and we knew that the subscription numbers for Dungeon were going up and kept going up. And so we had to assume that was because of choices made, like with the Adventure Path. We had feedback, of course, from people we talked to at conventions or that sent letters in back in the day where people would send letters. That was about it, really.
But it was enough to say, hey, let's do this again.
Yeah.
and hence came Savage Tide.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so James, while James collaborated with Eric on Age of Worms, he was sort of the father of Savage Tide. That's sort of his baby now.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was one that Eric had moved on to do editor-in-chief duties on Dragon, and I got promoted to editor-in-chief of Dungeon. And the third adventure path comes along. It's up to me to do the outline, to get everybody working on it, build all like the city of Sassurin where you start in, and find a location that is iconic, like we did with Age of Worms. It revisited with the city of Greyhawk. With Savage Tide, we wanted to go to the Isle of Dread, because that's also something to myself has always been just a formative adventure. It's dinosaurs on the Danger Island, basically.
Yeah.
Danger Island. What?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
kinda feel-
Chongo.
I kind of feel like the creepy uncle of Savage Tide, because I wrote the Isle of Dread article and then I wrote the Death Knight stuff. So
Yeah,
it seemed to have all
absolutely.
come together. And what really intrigued you about that? Did you think taking the characters way off the map would have been a good way to be able to contribute all new material to the setting?
To a certain extent, yes, and to another extent, of course, Isle of Dread is not in Greyhawk. It's in the Star.
We stole it fair and square.
Yeah.
But that was a very conscious choice because of the idea that if it's set
Awesome.
in one campaign setting, you can't use it. And by setting this in Greyhawk and using arguably one of the most iconic locations from Astara in Greyhawk, the idea, the hope was to show people that you can make a really fun game using this from Greyhawk, or this from Eberron, or this from the Star, or this from Ravenloft, or what, you
Yeah.
can patch together something really cool. It doesn't have to be all set in one setting.
It also kind of emphasizes the idea that the original module series, Slavers, Giants, they could be used in any other setting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of the push there, and then I think one of it's back to the art. We're working with Sean Glenn and Sarah Robinson as our art directors at the time, and this was before Peter Jackson's King Kong movie came out, or about the same time. And we got a couple of the concept artists, the key concept artists for those movies.
Wow.
Warren Mayhew, to do all that. We paid them to do like maybe 2 dozen concept art for the entire thing. And we published those in that first volume.
Echoes of Skull Island.
Yeah. And so that we had those guys, the lead creature designer, I think is what Ben did for King Kong. And we had them working with us to build this up. It made it feel just even more right. Because I mean, Isle of Dread is Skull Island.
Wow. Did not know that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so cool.
So the Crimson Fleet, is that from your homebrew too?
The Crimson Fleet is not really from my homebrew. I sort of made that one up for this thing. What is from my homebrew is the Red Mantis. And
which are in Pathfinder too.
Which are in Pathfinder. They're these mantis masked sort of assassins. And they are really pretty much inspired by the Scarlet Brotherhood. It's a assassin guild that dresses in red. And but I went with different sort of background and all that. But it's really when I started running my homebrew, I wanted to bring in a bunch of Scarlet Brotherhood adventures and stuff like that into my homebrew, but I didn't want to use the name because it would, of course, take people out of it. So I came up with the Red Mantis. And then I think the Crimson Fleet was like the third iteration of that thing. So rather than they were still they were still red involved, but rather than assassins, they were pirates. And it's just all sort of like that sort of Plinko brain where it just you drop something in the top and bounce. Oh,
that was also around the time that Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3 were out, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
With the creepy.
Pirates were part of mainstream culture back then in a way that it isn't right now. So
that now that I think about it, I think that's why we went with pirates is a big part of that stuff, is we knew that there was going to be big pirate stuff. I think. I don't know. That was years ago. I don't remember exactly where the Crimson Fleet came from, but we did. Other than that, we made them up for Savage Tide.
So how did the process work? Do you kind of thumbnail everything and then kind of get your wish list of writers together and parcel it out, or
It's
less
really,
organized than that?
It's gotten more organized as we've gone along, but the basic way it works is you get the basic plot line for something, and you just kind of write out an outline for however many adventures, 12 adventures. And when you're the architect of an adventure path, all of those different beats are yours to kind of come up with, but the details themselves are left to each individual author. So at that point, you look at like, well, this is one that's set in like a creepy, filthy city of Scuttle Cove. I know Rich Pett is like just a menace, and he can come up with all sorts of just weird horror themed stuff. So I wanted him to do that one. Greg Vaughn, I know, has like just a deep dive into just the lore of it. So I wanted him to do the last one. So you just kind of like look at the authors that you've already worked with and kind of fit them into those slots. But at the same point, if you do that, you just never expand the pool of authors. So I always, when I'm doing an adventure path, I'm always trying to bring in new authors and like give people new chances, or more increasingly, like get more diverse authors in there, so like more women, more people of color, so that you get as wide a wider net of authors working on these things, because that just makes the adventures more, surprising, less predictable.
Yeah.
Gary.
Oh, and I imagine the encounters and all the details are even a surprise to you when they come in, when the draft comes in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's really, and these days when we're doing a 6-part adventure path for Pathfinder, it's about the same amount of words as we did for a 12-part dungeon adventure. But the outline themselves is around 20,000 words. So in publication words, that'd be like 30 some pages of content just for the outline itself. And it takes a couple months to get that together. And then if you want to get an adventure path out constantly and not, skip a month, you just have to have a bunch of authors. It's the only option.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, you really mastered the art of the adventure path at Paizo. It's one of the staple part of your catalog of cool products is the adventure path.
Well, I see somebody asking in the chat, talk about Savage Type Player's Guide.
Yep.
The design process for Sasserine,
Go back to that.
for building cities, like I was mentioning earlier with Lundor Isle, and it's to me, it's so important that the place you start is intriguing, and there's a lot of stuff in there to look at. And I've always felt like maps are the ground zero for this. So for something like Sasserine, the first thing I did was I built a map for the entire town. And I think I was using Campaign Cartographer a lot at that point. And so you build that map, and then you start dropping in names. I kind of obsess over like street names and like coming up with fun names for towns, like not towns, but fun names for like locations. Like my favorite location in Sasserine is a kind of a low rent boat shop and the shop's called It Still Floats. And, they're selling boats like, but it still floats. It's cheap. You get what you're paying for. So we just start filling those things in, and I worked with Eric. Eric made this great list, the 30 questions you have to answer about your city before you let it loose in your players. And 30? It's got questions. Yes, it's 30. We published it in the first edition Game Master Guide for Pathfinder. But it's got questions like, what is there in the city that the bard would like to see? What are the 6 most memorable smells in your city? What would your significant other want out of the city? Just things that like are encouraging you as the writer to answer questions that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And sort of an expansion of that, whenever I do a starter city, be it like Sasserine or Sandpoint or something like that, I really try to make sure that whatever game system I'm writing for it, that there's something in there for every ancestry, for every class, for every sort of basic character concept. So you know, if ninja is a major element of the game and I'm writing something for that, I'll make sure there's a ninjas guild or something like that in the town, just so that there's, no matter who's playing the game, there's something for them to like either join or fight against. And yeah, that, and then that is basically the start. I did the same thing with when I got to map out Saltmarsh in the Dungeon Master's Guide 2. You take all of these, you just build the map, you start naming towns and streets and stuff like streets and buildings, and just start filling things in. And a lot of that is just looking back at just my youth, like where I grew up, being inspired by town, like weird characters in my hometown and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did not know that about Saltmarsh. So there's actually your original map, that map, and then the 5th edition map. So there's
Yeah, it's evolved. Yeah, it's evolved
Yeah,
over time. Yep.
It was when I joined up with this Dungeon Master Guide 2 team. I put down my I want to do the urban stuff, the city stuff, because there was in the outline, it's like provide a fully detailed city, and that's all it was. And Saltmarsh is that trilogy is one of my favorites from first edition, and there's no map of Saltmarsh in there, and that's always bugged me.
Yeah.
So this was my chance to like, well, now here's what a map of this town would look like, and so that was fun looking through those 3 adventures and kind of mining out like what Ned Shakeback was one of the guys in there, and he's the dude tied up in the one room, and where does he live in Saltmarsh, and if there's obviously there's like a haunted house up on the bluff, but why is that haunted house there? So it was again like doing that sort of RPG archaeology to pull elements out and then build something that makes sense.
Yeah, because you had the old module, but they were kind of devoid of anything except the encounter locations. That would no backstory was like 2 paragraphs tops. Yeah.
Speaking of archaeology, there's a lot of it in this.
Oh yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's sort of the holy grail of the archaeology projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, because Eric, when we had him on, he referred to you with a lot of backstories and stuff. Yes. Yeah, so, oh yeah, you have to ask James about that.
Yeah. Was it your idea to touch on key points in each of the towers instead of just slogging through the entire thing and making it a highlight and making it a story that took some time but really didn't make it into just a huge long dungeon crawl, which I thought was pretty genius?
It was all 3 of us, Jason, Eric, and I.
Okay.
It was really what we'd been doing in the magazines that had Wizards of the Coast come to us with kind of like, do you want to do this for a big giant hardcover adventure? And we're obviously like, yes, please. But it was really interesting because the 3 of us we got together. We had a lot of meetings just with ourselves and then with folks over at Wizards of the Coast. And there was stuff like what do we want to do with the maps? We knew that we didn't want to use the WG7 Castle Greyhawk because for obvious reasons. But there's also the 2nd edition Castle Greyhawk Ruins.
Yeah.
What was that one called?
Greyhawk Ruins. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Had some really, really detailed maps
like
for
that
thing. And that is just right out of it. So we decided we wanted to use that as our starting point and be as true to those maps as we could, but also expand on them where we wanted to like do new things. So there's a couple of those maps in there just of the top down levels. If you compare them with certain levels in that 2nd edition product, you'll see the same shapes of dungeons in there. Some of them have been collapsed and rebuilt, and some of them are brand new. But I've dungeon crawls are one of my favorite types of adventures to run. Just these big sprawling, because they're classic. But they get repetitive. It's just one room after room after room of just fight. So whenever I do adventures like that, I'd really try hard to put strange characters or unusual encounters in there so that you're going through this dungeon, you'll have a fight in the one room, and the next room over you've got like a weird puzzle, and the next room you just got like a really long conversation role-playing encounter with like some, maybe a crazy lich who's living in the dungeon is doing operations on an owl brain.
It's down there. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So the Arrow Demon, whose is it?
Arrow Demon, I think.
It's in here. It's pretty nasty. Guarding.
Oh,
It's as you're going to collapse the Great Staircase. That
it's
encounter.
not mine. It's
Okay.
not. My demon design theories are really kind of more. I like demons that are kind of evolved. It's really demons that sort of evolved out of like the sins and failings and awfulness of humanity, and that's to me what a demon is. Arrows to me aren't demonic; they're just arrows.
Okay.
I think the Arrow Demon was a Dragon magazine article,
Okay.
and it was if I remember correctly, it might have even had Wayne Reynolds illustrating them way early on, but yeah, where does the Arrow Demon show up? Which level?
It's
I think
where
it
you're
was
about to
bait.
collapse the staircase as the army of Ayus is coming up, and they're guarding
Ah,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just
That wasn't one of my done. A lot of we all had our own dungeon levels we had to do. Eric did almost all of the stuff out in the city itself,
okay.
and then my stuff was most of the once you get to the oh, got to get my copy.
So
Um,
you were with Vane before Vane, and then Igwolf with the Simulacrum Igwolf with Lavashti. Is that yours in that
that's mine.
spot? Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did probably the last third, maybe almost the last half of it.
I love the concept. I was talking to Eric about this. Is that with the Simulacrum of Igwolf, if you defeat her, you don't change anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't
Yeah,
go. It was a brilliant idea.
but it's
Absolutely.
also a case where simulacrum it's a photograph. You can't if you're a simulacrum, you can't grow, and it's something that I started doing with back in Headless, just looking at how the implications of the simulacrum spell, and did a little bit more of that in stuff I did for the Frostburn, whatever it was called, the Frozen supplement for third edition, and then it's really the culmination of just that whole idea is if you create something out of a simulacrum, they've got a mind, they know what they're doing, but they don't have a soul really.
Right.
It's sort of the whole clone story, and the idea that this simulacrum of Big Wolf can be whatever level she needs to be the boss of this dungeon without being this overwhelmingly powerful, conjurer. But still, it's a threat because if she manages to become the new Igwolf, that's bad news. You don't want two Igwolves.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Igwolf does. I don't know. Maybe Grassy.
Gary, do you have a question or two about expeditions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So it's one of the long-standing debates about who the prisoners of Castle Greyhawk were. How much did you guys stress over it? Did you decide on purpose, for instance, to leave some of it open to interpretation?
Yeah, we definitely talked a lot about who we wanted to put in there, which ones we wanted to not talk about. That was definitely one of the things that really intrigued myself the most is this idea that there's these prisons down there that I knew that I wanted to set my climax of the adventure in that area because it's the most intriguing part of it to me that there's all of these powerful creatures just trapped down there, and obviously even if they got away they would have left stains or like hauntings behind, and yeah.
Who came up with the term God Trap?
I don't know. Maybe me, maybe Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, it's this whole element when you're working with so many.
Yeah.
People. I've worked with Eric and Jason for 20 years now, or something like that. And
Oh, it's awesome.
looking back that far, it's hard to kind of.
It's always
Unless it's something from my homebrew that I have, like that I know is from me. It's hard to tell which one is which. I think that might have been. I don't know. It might have even been something pre-Eric, James, Jason.
Hey, yeah.
There's just so many iconic things in here that.
Oh yeah.
And attention to detail. There's a ton of Age of Warren characters that appear in here, which is
Yeah.
great, and that I love that
it's-
touch.
Yeah, I think God Trap was Gygax. I think.
Okay. Wow.
It might have been from like some of the Gordon novels he wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So Would you say that your time with Paizo Hawk and just Greyhawk, this is the culmination of this is the
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's really, I mean, we did so much with Greyhawk in Dungeon Magazine with like Savage Tide, bringing that in, and Age of Worms, and a lot of the other like the Isfin article we had Greg Vaughn do, and so much content in there that just was myself and Eric and Jason Bowman and others just playing around with Greyhawk.
Yeah.
That by the time we got to that adventure, that was really sort of what was building up. I mean, the Demonomicon articles too, of course. But
I was going to say
built up there.
There's a whole nother series that is attributable to James. Just all the work he's done on demons.
Let me get to one of those. I have
some
one of those
amazing
here.
lore.
So here we go. I only picked one because there's so many and they're fantastic. Here you go. Pazuzu, Demonicon of Igwolf. You have
the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have Baphomet, Acrophobia, Dagon, Demogorgon, Frab, Erlu, Grazitz, Koshichi, all of them. You have them all. Malkethenet and Zugtamori as well. So this is awesome.
Those are probably the thing that I'm most proud about doing in Dragon Magazine is that series of articles, just because
it's my favorite too.
Yay! I mean, as
they're fantastic.
As into Greyhawk as I am, I'm even deeper into just the lore of like the Abyss itself, and, like the Demon Lords, and there's so much of that in Greyhawk. I think that's why I'm such a big fan of Greyhawk. And they asked, what was that movie with Pazuzu, The Exorcist? Being able to just not only explore the demons and demon lords and all of their elements, you know, but also tied in with Greyhawk, with Igwolf and all that, was kind of like the perfect mesh of my D&D types of interests in the game, really. So Eric wanted, when he took over Dungeon Magazine as the editor-in-chief, he wanted to bring more, you know, kind of DM sort of content, more Greyhawk content in there. And he knew that I was, you know, into the demon side of things. And so he asked me if I wanted to do this Demonomicon Igwolf for Pazuzu. And I did, so wrote it up, and it ended up being way longer than it was supposed to be. So that kind of got me maybe a little bit snarky at, but I think it was for the best. I mean, there's a lot of information to get into. The thing that I enjoyed the most about writing those articles out of everything was the poems at the very start of each one of them. You don't get a lot of opportunities to write poetry when you're doing game design. And it's something that I've always kind of been into, just writing and stuff like that. And the first article that I did with Pazuzu, I think, was just a plain old poem. But as I started going, each demon started evolving their own sort of style of poetry, like Koshchikakai.
That's how you say
Koshchikakai. I wanted to do a poem that was sort of like the old epics, like the Greek epics and stuff like the Odyssey and all of that. And not Nocticula. Malcolm in particular is a sonnet, like a Shakespearean love sonnet. And Dagon's is a sea shanty. So you look at all these different poems at the front, and they're sort of done in the ways that that would work for those demons. And since it's poetry, you can get super metaphorical and you know, kind of hide what you're really talking about in a way that you can't really do with you know, just prose. So like, I think the Malcolm that one in particular gets pretty almost X-rated in the way you could interpret some of that stuff, because she's the demon lord of succubi and stuff. So she's obviously, you know, edgy in that way. I think the Koshchikakai one is this warmongering, misogynist, evil guy. And that's obviously gross to write about in prose, but if you do it in poetry, you can like do it in a way that's like, it's awful but beautiful at the same time. And it's just was a really interesting way to like kind of explore what a demon is. You know, it's like this terrible thing, but if you use poetry to make it not so, I don't know. Anyway, that was my fondest memory of the
Now I need to go back and read these articles again. Yeah,
especially for evil deities on Wednesday night, because
I think that the poem in front of Dagon, I think you can sing to the Gilligan's Island theme. I think. It may not be. Yeah. Anyway.
Yep. Oh, that's
Great question, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Gary, you got more. I know you do.
Oh yes, exactly. You have more.
All
I
right,
have
this is.
one.
I'm just kidding about this, but how awesome was it to edit my Spine Castle article in Dungeon?
I don't know. I didn't get to edit that one. That was Eric.
Oh, he took that one. Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the things back in those days is when the articles come in. There's one level of like, I want to do this one because I'm really interested in that, but it's also cases like I can do 12, you can do 12. Here's your stat. And Spine Castle was one that Eric did. I did a read through on it, and it was great. But I wasn't the one that was involved in the actual editing of that one. I remember, I think it was the third day working at Paizo. Maybe it was like fourth day or something like that. And my trial by fire was Eric came to my desk, threw a couple pages down on the desk and was like, here, edit Rari's stats. He's a 23rd level wizard. Do it right.
Wow.
All right. It's not like this guy's nobody's ever heard of him before, which obviously is not the case. So
Definitely trial by fire there.
Yeah.
So, as the last editor of Dungeon, how did you feel when you got the news that things were winding up? What were your goals in that last period?
Yeah.
So I took over editor-in-chief of Dungeon, I think with 139, the first volume of Savage Tide.
Shit, 11.
And I had, I think, 1 or 2 months before I realized we found out that there was an NSA.
How many issues did you have to publish then? Was it like 5,
11.
6 issues before the?
It was when we first learned about it.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast said your license ends on this day for the contract, and we looked at it and said, well, that will let us publish 5 volumes of Savage Tide, or maybe it was 6. It was about half of the adventure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we went back to them kind of like hat in hand and say, hey, we know this, you're taking the license back in. Obviously, we didn't know at the time it was for 4th edition. But can we keep the license through the end of Dungeon 160 so that we could do the entire adventure path? And they let us do it, which is, they didn't have to do it. And
yeah,
that's one of the things that's like, on the one hand, working with Wizards of the Coast was super stressful because you never know if they're going to approve something at the last or disapprove something at the last minute, and they own everything. So no matter how much work you put into it, it's not yours. You have to basically work on it and give it up.
Was their approval granular? Did you have to submit every article to them?
Yeah, every we had to, if we did something really weird, we had to get that approved. Like an adventure path outline, we had to get that approved. But the way it basically worked is we did the entire magazine and we had it all printed out on galleys and like this super expensive giant printer that it was like a cryogenic coffin looking thing. And then we would drive from Factoria or Redmond, drive, the 11 miles south to Renton, bring this giant stack of printouts and do like an hour-long meeting with the folks in the R&D department. They'd look through the thing, and what it usually amounted to was gamers who actually happened to work D&D getting to read Dragon or Dungeon before anyone else. So they were like kind of ooh, which is sort of a weird sort of reversal. But every once in a while, I was like, you can't do this illustration. That's too risque. You can't do that. We're doing something else. And we would have to, fix those things. Usually that gave us like maybe 3 or 4 days to get those fixes. But we got pretty good at explaining things or anticipating, diplomatizing. One of them at one point, there was an illustration of a mind flayer on the cover of Dragon magazine. I forget what volume it was. It was that kind of that, just grabbing the dude by the head and just, and we bring that in like 3 days before publication. And I think it was Chris Perkins picks that up and is like, this mind flayer has 6 tentacles. Mind flayers have 4 tentacles. And none of us had caught it because it just slipped our minds, probably because a lot of times the covers come in like at the very last minute and they just go directly to the art director and they laid out and everything. But so we looked at them and was like, damn, you're right, there's too many. Well, it's not a mind flayer, it's Eulithrid. They're the ones that have the more tentacles than that. And they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. So you kind of get like,
it's a
sometimes
mutant.
you get lucky. Yeah. Other times there was an illustration in Savage Tide that we had done. They're like, that's too That's too much. You can't do that. You have to repaint it because it was just too R-rated. And it wasn't that it was showing anything unusual. There was a pose for one of the characters that was just too risque, and it was the right call. We were always trying to push things and in the magazine, and we had to go back to the artist and say, hey, we need you to repaint this or fix this and everything. We had to pay for the painting twice, basically. But overall, there was never a case where we had to, we were pretty good at anticipating what they wanted, and they were pretty into what we were doing. Anyways, it was a really good partnership. And that's, I think, not as much as like not being able to work on D&D, but not working with, the folks over at Wizards of the Coast was really the kind of the heartbreak of the whole thing of losing the license, because we knew we were no longer working with them on their content. We're going to do something else going forward. But
so once you knew where you were on the clock, was there an article that you wanted to contribute or edit before the end?
There was a couple of them. Yeah, we like the Demonomicon article at a certain point was like, well, there's 666 layers of the abyss, so there's probably a lot of demons, and we could keep doing that forever and ever.
Yeah.
So I started picking demons that I wanted to do at that point that I was maybe holding off on doing. That's why Dagon and Malconthet and a couple of the others got in there before, ones that maybe were more obvious, like Orcus or Grazit.
It looks like Grazit was last.
Yeah, Grazit was written
360.
For once the magazine went online, and that was the case. That was Wizards of the Coast asked me to write that for them. I think the idea was they wanted that in there as a way to say, hey, we're still doing the same sort of content to keep people subscribing, but that was the last one I did.
That illusion didn't last long.
No. Yeah.
What a shame.
D&D is a very powerful brand, and it can recover from a lot. Obviously, I mean, it recovered from the whole, Mothers Against Dungeons and Dragons scandal, the Satanic Panic stuff. It recovered from missteps all over the place.
Yeah,
although now.
Not so much the content. I just think there's just something about having a paper issue with beautiful art, maps, etc., in your hands.
Yep. It's definitely something that, on the one hand, it's sad to not have that legacy still going. On the other hand, it's a load off my mind that I'm actually going to be able. There's a point where I can stop buying bookshelves to hold my magazine collection because I can have a complete collection. But and it's just magazines in general. We're already on a just with the internet becoming more and more prevalent in society, and just magazine production itself is so. There's a lot of. I'm not going to say it's like mob stuff going on, but there's a lot of just institutionalized elements of making a magazine happen. Like keeping your spot on the shelf and making sure that you have your subscriptions right and everything like that. That it's really complicated. Like when we lost the subscription, or we lost the license, we had a lot of people who had multi-year subscriptions for a magazine that we knew was going away. And if we had not done something, our solution to that was to do the Pathfinder Adventure Path and say, if you had a subscription to Dragon or Dungeon, it's rolling right over into the Adventure Path.
I remember I was one of them. Yeah.
So that was one choice that you had as a subscriber, was just to roll your subscription over. Or you could say, nope, no thank you, and let's get your money refunded, basically. And there was a certain number of people, and it wasn't a very large number of people, if they had chosen to get the refunds, Paizo would have been done, because we didn't have enough money to refund all of the subscriptions because they'd been going for so long.
Wow.
And so it's really, the fans, the readers, the fellowship of fellow gamers that kind of kept Paizo alive after that event, because they stuck with the subscription for something.
Well, it was kind of obvious. It wanted more content, not the money back. Yeah,
that's true too.
Yeah.
James, do you have a favorite Pathfinder adventure path that you've really worked on? I
Yeah.
mean, some of them are really, fantastic.
It's hard for me to pick a favorite one because that's sort of like, what's your favorite kid?
Yeah,
Um,
understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
but I think probably the one that I'm the proudest of is the first one is Rise of the Rim Lords. It's the one
Okay.
that there was a point where just as we had to beg Wizards of the Coast to let us do everything all the way to the end of Savage Tide and expand the license for another 5, 6, 7 months, we had to basically go to Lisa Stevens, uh, the overlord of Paizo, and say, hey, no matter what, can we have your guarantee that we can get these 6 volumes out so that we don't have something that's halfway done? And she said, yeah, we'll do that, but it's got to make money, and if it doesn't make money, part 6 is the last one. So the fact that it made it all the way through and is now we're up to like volume, I think we just right now I'm approving volume 163, I think, which is
Wow.
the first one I've written since volume 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it works. So yeah,
Yeah. How
thanks for
many?
playing.
Yeah. How many adventure paths do you Paizo normally publish in a year? 2, 3?
We do 2. We're
Yeah.
coming up with next year. We're going to be doing 3, so we're doing a 3-part one, a 3-part one, and a 6-part one. But
Yeah.
it's pretty much been 2 a year
Yeah.
since the
Hmm.
start. And the
Yeah.
idea
I've
there
played
is that
several. Yeah.
if you don't like this one, you don't have to wait half a year for the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. How many total has there been?
Adventure Paths.
Yeah. And
We're up to 163, 164, around 168 volumes. That divided by 6, I guess.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple dozen.
30,
Yeah.
almost 30, 28.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And now is a question I've been dying to ask you a little bit about. Now we're getting into the Pathfinder and more kind of widely than just Greyhawk, and
Mhm.
and that's the role of the campaign setting in
Right.
role-playing game. Meaning it's in some games the game setting is everything. Meaning the setting is the kind of the thing that holds it together, and then you have some rules and stuff so you can play in it. But there are other games and where it's mechanics and you have loose adventures and stuff, and the concept of setting, some gamers don't even seem to be interested in having knowing all about the world. What do you see is that in Paizo have done a huge investment in an awesome big setting where the adventure paths is set. How do you see the role of the game setting in the industry and in various games, so to speak?
It's from the business side of things for Paizo, it's hugely important for a possibly unique reason.
Uh-huh.
Since we use the OGL for Pathfinder, that allows us, of course, to use a lot of the content from Dungeons and Dragons. You know, we have things like gelatinous cubes and
Yeah.
all of the rust monster, the bulette, all of these really famous, honestly, Greyhawk monsters that we can still use since we're using the OGL. But one of the things that happens when you use the OGL is you have to give back to that whole element.
Mhm.
So all of the rules we produce are essentially free. You can go online and get all of the rules you want. And there's, nothing stopping somebody from publishing a brand new game that is, there's already those out there. There's other versions of D20 games out there.
Yeah.
And so we don't own the rules. They're out there. They're part of the world, I guess. But so for as far as intellectual property goes, the setting is what Paizo owns. So if we get like a video game or a comic book or a novel or a movie or like an HBO series or something like that, that's our brand that we can use to then leverage more content about. So it's from the business side of things, it's hugely important to have a setting like that.
Yeah.
From the game side of thing, I think it's equally important for a different reason, because you need to have stories. And if there's no story for a role-playing game for you to get excited about, then it's not a role-playing game. It's still a game. It's like a war game or a miniatures game. It's still fun.
Yeah.
But it's not the same sort of thing. And so when we're doing adventures or coming up with names of like deities or stuff like that, we have to make something up. And in most cases, it's going to be, some of it is drawn from, public domain or mythology, but other stuff is just, nonsense words you make up. And if those nonsense words and all that content is from a campaign setting that you can draw from, then that gives you an internal sort of baseline to build your rules around. And then people get into it, and it's just sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy if you do it right. One of the things we decided early on was we didn't want to do multiple campaign settings. We just wanted one, because that was sort of one of the things that sort of came back to hit TSR, was they had so many campaign settings that, if you were into Planescape, you probably weren't buying Birthright. If you were into Birthright, you probably weren't buying Forgotten Realms. And maybe 2 or 3 people would buy 2 campaigns, 3 campaigns, but they had so many that it was really split the audience.
Yeah.
So
Dragonlance, all of them.
with
You're
Galarian,
absolutely
we wanted to make it just one setting. There's all crazy stuff in there.
Yeah.
There's a
but you kind of regionalized it into
Yes.
to having, so that was my follow-up question. Meaning, what did you learn? Because the game setting Galarian is a key part of it, and meaning, what was your kind of your lessons you took from earlier attempts in the business, like from Wisdom Coast and others, to how to design it, because you got a fresh start. You could kind of
Well, it's also a case too where it's like when we had to start working on Pathfinder, we were still working on Dungeon, and we had to have it so Dungeon 150 and Dragon 359 ended on, I think it was July or June.
Yeah.
Pathfinder 1 had to start the very next month, so we didn't have any time to stop. So we had to start building the entire campaign setting. All of the proper nouns. We had to come up with like names for deities like Rovagug and Saragrain and all that, and locations and everything, while we were still finishing up Dungeon Magazine. So there wasn't an awful lot of time to actually build a setting. So that's why I drew a lot of the stuff in the first ones from my homebrew.
I thought that was something you've been working on for like 2.5 years before, but you didn't know that is going to happen with more than a few months. So
Well, like Desna, I invented Desna as a deity in my homebrew back in, I think, 1989. So there's a lot of elements of Pathfinder that are as old as, older than Eberron for sure. Not quite as old as Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk, but definitely long in the tooth by the time it ended up in Galarian. And then we made sure that there's other people, like everybody has their own sort of elements and places in the world that they're kind of the custodians for or the champions for, so that everybody in the editorial department of Paizo has their own sort of areas that they can be proud of, I guess.
Yeah. And another interesting question when it comes to setting and setting design is that a lot of the settings like Greyhawk, Forgotten Realms, and others, they were someone's homebrew to begin with, and then they became kind of a commercial setting. But Galarian is built from the ground up to support a rich ecosystem of products and stuff. What's the difference in design or kind of ideas on how to do something that supports organized play, supports adventure paths, products and stuff, rather than just be some home group kind of idea?
It's definitely bringing in multiple people to work on different parts of it is the key for it. Like, so for my homebrew setting, there would be things like Metagalti Isle, Kyonin, big chunks of Varisia, the Darklands, parts of the Darklands are all in there. But if it was just stuff for my homebrew, one person, even writing for 10 years, can't do something that expansive. It takes so many years and so many people. So when we get to like organized play, we'd say like for the organized play stuff, we need like to focus on this big city, Absalom, and for like the modules line, we wanted to look at different locations. So it's sort of compartmentalizing things. Really.
So how much of your role is to go in and say, to coordinate things, so stories and grant things, or do you let various regions live their own life and
it's sort of my role is to kind of like make sure they're all flowing in the same direction, but they don't all have to the game is not just for one person. And so getting more people, getting them in there to expand and explore things that are interesting to them is really important. But it's mostly at this point what it boils down to is just like reading through a lot of the product and giving feedback to the other authors and developers and writers, and kind of helping to hopefully inspire them to take what we started with and then moving forward to take it into the next era of
Yeah.
of gaming.
And
really.
now comes a kind of technical question in a way, but
And
how do you?
real quick, 1 second, James,
Yeah,
we're running a
sorry.
little late. Are you okay if we
Oh,
hang on
sorry,
for a
I
little bit?
forgot.
Oh
the-
yeah, I'm
Okay, I
fine.
just want to make sure.
Okay,
Just want to make
great,
sure.
yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
So meaning now you're sitting on an ever expanding enormous amount of lore and stuff.
Mhm.
How do you keep track of it? So meaning, do you set up a big database? Do you put like, yeah? How do you kind of maintain consistency? So things actually, when you
It's
go back and yeah.
it's definitely tricky. We've got
Yeah.
there's a couple of there's a wiki that is sort of mostly fan maintained, but we've got Mark
Oh yeah,
Rowland,
you
who
had
is our,
fans can do that job
Yeah.
fairly well. Yeah, that's great.
but we've
Yeah.
also got our director,
Yeah, meaning you.
our
Yeah.
friend, like, and is able to go in there and kind of keep people going in the right direction. We've
Oh
got
yeah. So when you have to do an art order, then you
Yeah.
have to go in and yeah.
and that's something that we're constantly working on, is building like Bibles for the setting, and art Bibles,
Yeah.
word Bibles, like so.
Mhm.
It's a lot of it is like stuck in my head, and a lot of it is stuck in Eric's head and
Yeah.
Jason's head.
Yeah.
So we often have like big meetings. It's harder to do when we're all working from home, but when we're all in the
Yeah.
office, that's a big key element why we were all in the office. It's a big open area. We'd have meetings
Yeah.
with each other. We
Yeah.
game with each other. I run all of the games I'm playing with and running now are mostly with fellow employees or ex-employees.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like this hive mind, I guess, starts building up. And then when new employees come in, you sort of download that into them with meetings and feedback, and then let them take it in new directions. And
Yeah, because I've encountered that now when I'm working as a commissioned cartographer on very, especially with Kobo Press and Midgard, meaning I never played in Midgard, and I realized that what an enormous amount of information. So and I don't want to pester them to death by all the weird questions and stuff. Meaning that's one of these kind of really hard. How do you convey the right information to people that need to work with something without getting either them overloaded or the people that needs to feed them information overloaded? That seems to be one of the
it's tricky. I mean, we're still working on it too. I mean, the secret is to just be patient and to respect what's come before, because you never know if you're in a meeting with somebody and done something you're about to badmouth. So, but just respect everybody, respect what's come before, and be open-minded and communicate is really the big thing. It can be hard to do, but that's the key.
Yeah, I really started to respect other people that work in this business when I had to start working on things that were not my own passion projects, but things that actually someone paid me to do. Then all of a sudden, that all these considerations bring, I don't know nothing about this, and what you ask and stuff like that. And you have a time frame. I need to do this in 2 months or 6 months.
With a very limited number of people. I mean, you look at something like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah,
those are huge. They've got entire armies of people to handle. Star Wars is the greatest example.
Yeah.
But you've got entire companies that are in charge of like the continuity for Star Wars.
That's true. Yeah. And here we have a few people that sit and do that as part-time of what they do as well. So yeah. Thank you so much. That was some of the questions I've been dying to ask since we got the chance here. So
communication, patience, and luck, I guess, is the three keys.
Yeah.
Gary, you got to have a couple other tidbits here.
Well, I just got two finishing questions, I guess. One would be, so if you had your druthers, if you were put in charge of Greyhawk in 2021, what would you do?
Oh my gosh, I would, if I were fully in charge of Greyhawk in 2021, I would probably compile Age of Arms into a hardcover. That's probably the first thing I would do. Is I would do that.
Idea.
I would expand on it, use it as a way to support a big Greyhawk book.
Savage Tide as well?
Not immediately, but yeah, eventually do something with Savage Tide. I would look back at the. I would also honestly reach out and contact everybody that worked on Greyhawk originally and give them the opportunity to come back and help out.
Like Len.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
James Ward, Len.
Yeah.
That was something that happened to a certain extent when they started third edition, but I don't think to the best extent that it could have. But
Yeah,
really,
I think from Eric's point of view, he was very solicitous
yeah.
of,
Oh,
of the
absolutely. I mean,
of the old authors, and he would have loved to have them contribute even more
yeah.
if they
And
could. Yeah.
there's some burnt bridges, there's some bad blood, but it's really just making sure that I would rather have somebody say no thank you than not ask them if they want to help
Yeah.
out with it. So, yeah, that's probably what I would do. Is I would start with
So you would avoid doing a big setting book. First, lay down some markers.
I think so. If I had, but that's also sort of I know how much work it is to do a setting book and this, that, and the other thing. I think that if you get somebody hooked on the story, then first, and that's an adventure, then you can do the setting. I mean, we didn't have the setting book for Galarian out right away when we did Rise of the Runelords. So, but I wouldn't wait too long for sure. I would probably do a small. I mean, go back to Gaius with the sort of the bullseye approach. I would do something for the city of Greyhawk, and then something for maybe the central region around it, and then maybe the entire planet or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then one of the other questions we'd like to ask our guests towards the end is, do you have a piece of prized memorabilia that you would like to show, or some book or something that you may have acquired over the years? Eric and Jason had some stuff to show.
Let me see if I can find it real quick.
You could.
Hey.
I'll be right back.
You throw a curveball in there, Gary.
Yeah, that was
But that should be part of the show every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Canadian, I don't understand your question about creating LG or Mystara Living, bring back one of the two older game settings, and then what was the opinion on Birthright Kingdom Gazetteer release? Could it be seen for Greyhawk as well? I'm not sure I understand those questions.
Yeah, one of the things I would love to do for Greyhawk was to do a birthright kind of mechanics book a little bit. But on the other hand, now there's even better. I would use the Pathfinder Ultimate Campaign data and stuff and feed that into for a Greyhawk book. That will be that type of kingdom building and stuff like that. And Birthright was kind of the first of it. And then there's been several others.
Does that kind of help you run like a Game of Thrones type setting?
Yes, exactly. You can run not only the characters, you can run the countries and the cities and stuff like that. And you can play out on two levels. You can have the characters play one level, and then you can have the political over what happens.
Maybe perfect for the East, the Great Kingdom.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's that type of something I would love to see. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as like memorabilia or stuff like that, what I was looking for was there's that Adventure Lost Caverns of Sajkin.
Oh, the original? An original?
No, not the original.
Oh, I was just, oh my gosh.
I don't think the original. So one of the things that happens with Paizo is when we moved everything over from Wizards of the Coast, we brought over a lot of like art resources, so like just flat files and just things that have been accumulated through like years and years and years. And at one point, we were looking through all of these things, and it was stuff that was just going to get thrown out. And I managed to, in that stack of art, was the illustration of a stone giant. I think it was Holloway, I think. This illustration of a stone giant being tripped into a chasm on the inside front cover of Sajkant's. And so I grabbed that. It's the original art.
Wow.
So
wow.
I've got that somewhere. And I've got it. It's a case where I've got it stashed away somewhere, like in a file, hidden away or something like that. So it's I don't really know where it's at. I just saw it a couple months ago when I was organizing some papers. But that's probably the oldest artifact that I own, because it was just going to get. That's another thing too. Is like a lot of that stuff is just it would have gotten thrown out because it's work for hire. It's no longer owned by the original artist. So, and in a lot of cases, tracking down where all that stuff is difficult. But so rather than that, I grabbed off the wall over in my living room. It needs dusting. But it's this thing.
Oh wow!
Oh wow! Yeah.
Which is the original cover for the last Age of Worms adventure. by Wayne Reynolds.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh!
Oh, wow.
Look at that.
That's amazing. Yep.
So that's probably my favorite,
Phew.
I would say, Greyhawk bit of memorabilia that I own. I've bought several other illustrations Wayne's done, like the cover for Burnt Offerings and the Mauricio art for our Rogue character and a couple of.
Mhm. Oh yeah,
there's,
is that the one you're sitting on the wall, hanging on the wall there? Yeah.
Oh, that one back there is over there is
Yeah, we see.
that's a character that one of my PCs actually. So
Oh.
one of the unspoken advantages of working like this is you can bring your player characters into the setting as an NPC and then have
Yeah.
super talented artists create them. And so
Mhm.
that's my character Shensen that I play in Band of Bravos. I played her in like for 3 or 4 years in Jason Nelson's post-apocalyptic Forgotten Realms campaign. She shows up in Shackled City actually as well.
Oh, nice.
And
Cool.
so I put her in in Pathfinder 100, and Wayne painted her up, and then I got to spend a lot of extra money to buy it. So that's one of the things that I think is
It's wonderful.
probably my favorite,
Yeah.
really unique Greyhawk
Awesome.
memorabilia. It's the
Yeah.
last cover of Age of Worms.
Beautiful. Well, we got a question from the audience. Mark at Mark Creative Mountain Games asked, so all of Greyhawk, what is like the worst place you think exists? And my guess is you're going to say Scuttle Cove, but that's okay.
The worst,
Like,
place
yeah,
I've been-
like the most dangerous, it could be, or what do you think of a vial as far as Greyhawk?
um,
Dorka,
probably-
it
I
could-
use this throne room.
okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, Dorka.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
not just dark, just the actual place where he sits and is cranky all the time.
Yeah.
Cranky. That's a good.
That's a good.
That's a good way. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
So,
Cranky. Yeah.
oh man, Gary,
I'd go,
go ahead.
I'd go with the chamber where the skulls are being prepared for the road.
Oh
Mm,
God,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
a nice one.
Yeah.
Oh, that adventure that the prison break adventure.
Yeah, Eyes Evil. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that
yeah,
one.
yeah.
City of Skulls. Yeah, City of Skulls.
Yeah, City Skulls. That's got some
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
unpleasant places to have to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Any further questions, Gary or Anna? I know we're holding him James a
Yeah,
little
Mark.
late.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh,
Okay. All right. Cool.
James was awesome.
Yeah,
Oh
thanks.
yeah.
It was fun.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, James, for
What
coming.
would you like to say in closing?
Yeah, meaning-
Pathfinder, Greyhawk, the whole experience of your life since you were 15 years old. You've been doing this, which is pretty amazing.
Somebody just brought in Paizo did the Spelljammer thing, Shadow of the Spider Moon. Was there any sort of discussion doing Greyhawk's Crystal Spear or Gray Space? Not really. We a lot of those things that we did in the back half of like this Shadow of the Spider Moon and Gammon World and stuff like that were sort of just passion projects that we'd had. If an author was like really wanted to do this, we would say, okay, do it, and we'll publish it. So, anyway, so what was the question? I got distracted by that one. The closing.
Yeah, like
argument.
for you, the experience since you were 15 years old. It's been your life, which has been, you've been in this industry for a long time.
It's if you can find a way to take something that you're really passionate about and love doing, and not just that you can make money doing it, that's always nice, but if you can make that so that other people can be entertained as well, I think that's really the end goal.
Yeah.
Because there are people that get rich doing RPGs and stuff like that, but it's really, the old joke is the best way to make $1 million in the RPG industry is to start with $2 million.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, that's really the thing that is the most fun to just seeing other people having fun in the same way I had fun with things that other people did, like that whole kind of trickle down thing. So hopefully somebody that's into like Greyhawk or Galarian or something like that 10, 20 years from now will be inspiring their own new generation of gamer out there.
I certainly
I
hope
remember
so.
when I have this really vivid memory of riding the school bus. It was a 12 minute ride from home down the mountain through the woods. And I remember it was like, I think sixth grade or sixth or seventh grade. And I sat there and I suddenly realized it was, I think, the first year of high school, because I was like no longer in elementary school, and I was like, I'm starting to grow up, and at a certain point, I'm going to be an adult, and that means I can't play games anymore. And that really kind of weirded and freaked me out, because
Wow.
at that point I was growing up with these games were brand new. There were no role-playing games for
Yeah.
my parents to play. And so obviously here I am, and I'm working there, I'm playing video games still, and so that's something that was a relief when I got to grew up and I realized, oh, we can still play games.
So, any tidbits on something secretive that you can throw out that's coming out soon, or
Tidbits on
a little Easter egg? Did you-
well, the most recent thing we announced for Paizo, for Pathfinder, was the Strength of Thousands Adventure Path and the Malonga Expanse book. So that's really it's a region that is very, very heavily inspired by African mythology, and the Strength of Thousands Adventure Path is kind of like, it's an adventure path where you start out as students for the oldest magic school in the entire region, and you become students, you become professors, teachers at this college, and then eventually you have to save this thing from a threat, obviously.
Oh wow!
And so, not only is it so everybody's got some level of magic, and not only is it an adventure path where you're it's like the magic school adventure path, but it's that we've got such a diverse group of writers for it. A lot of really brand new, really brilliant writers who never really had a chance to do a lot of RPG stuff before. It's pretty cool. I'm halfway through reading the Malonga book right now, and it's just, I think it's the first time I've seen sort of a D20 style Africa setting book that feels right in a lot of cases, because it's got a lot of people of color working on it, and it's really,
It's well researched.
yeah, it's well researched. It's not necessarily, not that it's well researched, but it's written by the right people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm really excited to see what people are gonna be into. Oh, so I think I've seen people mention before pop up in the threads here and there, and there's one that just pops in where it's, would the Malonga Expanse be used as 7 to fill Monoland?
Yep.
The question of would Galarian fit into Greyhawk? And it absolutely would, because the inspirations for Galarian, the bones of Galarian, is on one level it's Greyhawk, because it's myself, it's Eric, it's Jason. It's got D&E's genetics deep inside its bones, but it's also beyond that. It draws upon like a lot of the old pulps and a lot of the old the same sort of stuff that inspired Gygax to do this game in the first place. So thematically, I think fitting a lot of Galarian into Greyhawk would work pretty well. I mean, I could see it just showing up on the other side of the globe, or on
Sure.
another planet further out, on the other side of the sun, maybe. It should thematically fit in pretty. And by the same extension, if you look at it from a different angle, it fit pretty well in like the Forgotten Realms setting. Once you get out into like a, Birthright or Eberron, where it's a more different sort of baseline flavor, it gets a little trickier. But yeah, I for example, like Savage Tide, there's this region in Galarian called the Shackles. I could see that whole adventure path kind of be taking place in these pirate islands down there. So yeah, I think it would work pretty well, certainly, because I mean, a lot of the stuff that I brought in from my homebrew to put into Galarian was stuff that I kind of was inspired by, and like reskin from Greyhawk, like the Scarlet Brother turning into the Red Mantis.
It's very intriguing. Absolutely. Wow. Great questions tonight from everyone from the audience too.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, definitely.
Unbelievable questions. So I know I probably said this before, but thank you so very much for coming and sharing your experiences. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
I asked this question of Eric, and I asked this question of Jason. I'm going to ask this question of you, James. If in the future an opportunity presents itself to guest play in a game, an old school 1E, 2E game, would you consider hopping in for a game down the road?
Absolutely. I've wanted to go back and play a first edition game for a long time.
Beautiful.
I kept bumping. I would do things like run Temple of Elemental Evil just as is, but use Pathfinder rules and stuff already. But I had this idea that I wanted to just sit down with a bunch of people and play Tomb of Horrors, just using the 20 characters in the back. And if your character dies, roll 1d20 and get the new character. And the idea was, can you make it through that dungeon on those 20 characters?
Didn't you have some involvement with a third-party Tomb of Horrors supplement? Maybe writing monsters or something? I can't remember.
There was a Dragon article, I think. There was
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't Frog or Troll Lords or anything.
No,
like that.
no, it wasn't.
Have you ever have you freelanced outside of Paizo?
I did. The very first thing I did was for Jim Butler's company, Bastion Press. I did this villains book, which is a bunch of. That's like the first point I've used Sandpoint and something.
Oh.
I've done a little bit for that. I've done some articles here and there for Kobold Quarterly, for Wolfgang. I haven't done the biggest thing that I've probably done was worked with, and another career highlights was I wrote about 100,000 words for the Pathfinder Sandy Peterson Guide to Cthulhu Mythos.
Oh,
so
cool.
working with Sandy Peterson on the Lovecraft stuff was just the meetings that we would sit like virtual like Zoom meetings before we were all doing Zoom meetings. Just sitting there and listening and just start talking about like, well, this is the way that a Dark Young's insides work, or this is how the Haster works. He's like this creature that if you can see him, he can interact with you, and he exists on the idea that space doesn't exist, that the third dimension doesn't exist for Haster, so that if he's on a different star and you can see that star, he's there in front of you. He's just really tiny, but he's still super powerful stuff. That was one of the things that I really enjoyed the most recently, was working with Sandy Peterson on that project. But a lot of what I do, it's Pathfinder's Paizo.
Yeah.
Eric can't spare you.
No, absolutely not. So
it's also a case too of like it's my job, and it's important to me to kind of try to maintain a separation between gaming for fun and gaming for work, and it's hard to do when you're it'll mess you up. You want to keep that passion for what you're doing, and you need to remind yourself that you're still playing. So a lot of the stuff like for Call of Cthulhu or other games that I play, I've been tempted to try to like say, hey, do you want to work together or something like that?
No, but yeah.
Oh no, this Cthulhu book looks like a must-buy.
It was a lot of fun to do. They did one for 5e, or a version of it for 5e. I think they're working on one for second edition Pathfinder right now, but it was a lot of fun. It was really the thing that actually, beyond working with Sandy Peterson on the Cthulhu project, which is like kind of jaw dropping even to me today, but getting to design like rules for here's cats as a player character race. How does that work? And it's this design arena that we don't really do in Pathfinder. It's like, how do you play a creature that is smaller than a halfling by like 1/3 the size of a halfling and doesn't have hands and can't talk? So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in that book.
we got one last Greyhawk question from Big Mac from the Piazza. So and he asks if best case scenario, DM's Guild got reopened and there was something you wanted to re-examine in Greyhawk and write up a little adventure on it. What would be your go-to?
Ooh. So a lot of what I did with Savage Tide and Return to the Past or Greyhawk, the title changed like 2 or 3 times in the writing. But a lot of that stuff represents really the things I really wanted to do with the setting. But I think if there was something I would want to do, it would be to take that hex map of the Underdark from Descent to the Depths of the Earth and fill everything up.
Oh man!
Awesome! Oh, that's an awesome idea.
Do that entire thing, especially like I don't remember the name of the Illithid city deep down, which was like
Abylos. Yeah, Abylos City too.
Just basically do that mega adventure that just fills every single one of those tunnels and caverns up.
Oh man!
You do have to wonder why that was never done.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
they did the night below, of course, which is sort of a divergence of that. But I don't know. That's probably the thing that I'm really good at biting off more than I should chew. So
That's Herculean. I mean, that's a
I
lot of
guess.
space when you think about it.
yeah,
I think that is a requirement to work in this business, that at least you try to chew off more than you can. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you try. You have to try. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Gary, what do you got going on out there, man? What's going
Oh, you
on in
mean
your world?
different from what I just said on Wednesday?
Yeah, you.
Well, it's a different show, Gary. Come
Exactly.
on.
It's meaning it's a couple of days, so you must have done some miracles.
People are transient. They
between
don't
now and then.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on some features for Cannon Fire, creating a interactive version of the index of all the products, and
Yeah.
focusing on how we'd present the NPCs that we found in there, because they're all from all different editions. So it's kind of a challenge to classify them. And then, the new article coming out in North Journal, from what I understand from Christoph, it's done and could be released any day now.
Beautiful. Everyone's
Yeah,
looking
I saw
forward to
some
that.
teasers. Yeah.
It's going to be a great article, and it ties into what's happening during Virtual Greyhawk Con with Gary's character, his specialty priest of Saint Benedor. So there you go. So we will have we'll see that character in less than 2 weeks, right? Getting all excited.
My
Yeah.
character and Eric's character seem destined to hate each other.
Yes, and I have them both right here. So let's share
Yeah.
them real
Ooh.
quick. We
If
have
you want to get in good on Eric's side, make sure your character is like a pet pug.
yes, and,
awesome.
and
Yeah.
good old Eric has. I don't have his printed because he still hasn't given me a name, but he has a specialty priest of Ralishaz. So that's the
Yeah.
one I don't have printed out. And then of course Luke Gygax last week, son of Melf. So there we go. Smells, yeah. So we're
Yeah.
really set for that. It's going to be a fun time. So, Gary, thank you for hopping in too and asking some great questions tonight as usual. Thank you, really appreciate it. And we've come a long way. The whole community's come a long way in the last couple years, and it's been fantastic. So I really appreciate it. Anna.
Well,
going
I've
on?
been working a couple of days since last. I've worked some hours on Midgard, and I worked on some secret project for Kobo Press. That other secret object that I think a lot of Midgard and Kobo Press fans and Midgard players would love when it comes out in the future. So I can tell you more about that. But it's always fun to dig into some of that. And then I'm working on the map for the cover for the atlas, so it's getting ready. That's basically the only thing that needs to be done. It might be a little bit tweaking on the legend as well, but seems like most people like the last preview kind of idea of how to do it. That is coming. And so then the atlas will be ready, except for the appendixes that will not have done in 2 weeks, but the index and all the maps and the credits and the legend and the cover will be done. And then I'm also working on something that I haven't spilled the beans on yet. And that's something for my I've only told Jay a little bit, and I said it before that we started the show here. And that's something that will be part for. I needed it for my upcoming Shieldlands campaign, and I've been mapping the southern Shieldland. I realized next to Shieldlands, the most interesting thing is the big volcano, and you all know what I'm talking about here, the White Plume Mountain. And so I realized, what the heck, I need to map the White Plume Mountain too. So I kind of dug in while we had the game yesterday. I actually sat down and got like 6 hours of mapping the big volcano. And at first I was like, no, this is going to get too difficult, but it's starting to look good. So that is coming. So I will show on my seminar, I will show the first couple of screenshots and ideas of what I envision the area. And we are talking the whole mountain area, probably about 150 or 100 by 150 miles in great detail, meaning the final renders of that will be 5 feet per pixel. So we can talk trees and all that stuff. So that will not be finished in a long shot. That will take months to finish it. But I will do some areas and I will patch up some of the areas that I will need for my campaign. But the cool thing is that I'm building the base to go in and do kind of detailed studies and maps that you can use for a campaign, so to speak. So it's coming. It's the next generation of Greyhawk maps are starting to take shape, and I'm getting really stoked with the results because we can do some really cool presentations with it, and it will be data, elevation data, and the whole shebang, textures and stuff like that. So you can go in and modify. And the idea is all this should be presented in raw data form too. So all of you who want to say, I don't want a forest there, I want a forest over here, and my road should go somewhere else and stuff. So not only the finished map, but I also want to make all the raw data available. So everyone who wants to sit and make their own version of it should be able to do so. It will require more, how much extensive changes and stuff you want to do. Then the more changes you want to do, the more you need to know about how to do it. But it should be possible, because customizing, making the own version of it is the idea. So one of the ideas that several people have asked me, like, oh, you should do a cartography show once a week or something like that. So we're thinking about, I just need to find the right people to collaborate with to see if we can have a Twitch show where we talk somehow, some way to start talking about fantasy cartography as its own topic, like on a weekly show or something like that, because there is a lot of, I keep answering the same questions over and over and over again. And it will be good to kind of go over both the technical side and also the kind of artistic, meaning how do you present geographical information for role-playing games. And that is an interesting question, because there's so many different styles and variations and ideas.
Yeah.
It's a bit like rule systems or whatever. There are different tastes, different ideas and stuff. So that is something that I'm working on. And also working on my seminar too. So I will be presenting for the first time, actually, kind of in a coherent form, my own ideas of what I'm doing with Greyhawk. So, and now when we have James here, is like, I'm running my Greyhawk and have been since Pathfinder 1 came out, using the Pathfinder rule system. So I've been doing it for and now I'm converting it over to Pathfinder 2nd edition. So because I can really like the rule set. So that's an interesting little take in itself. But it will not be a rules mechanics heavy. It will be a few things. There will be a few house rules and stuff that I talk about, but more from kind of a concept, how I want to do with the setting and ideas, so you know what you not want to do and what you want to steal from me. So, and that's the idea. Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
And James, any final thoughts?
Oh, well, thanks for having me on the show. It's always, I haven't really done any deep dive into Greyhawk stuff for ages, and it's always, it's fun. It's like nostalgia, but it's the same point. It's like, oh yeah, that's kind of why I'm here in the first place. So.
Nostalgia is a good thing, and that's so going from Eric, Jason, Luke, and yourself, man, over the last like 2-3 months, it's been brilliant discussions.
Yeah.
And thank you so very much for agreeing to come on tonight and chatting with us. And I know we all learned a lot that we did not know before, and got some more insights into what was going on there during those years. And it sounds like it's almost like that sounds like the golden age. It was like the golden age of like that post-Living Greyhawk or during Living Greyhawk and all. You guys did some fantastic work, which is great. I really am glad that I learned some things tonight I did not know, and that is always a good thing.
Lots of it.
Always fun to air the dirty secrets.
Yeah.
So, what's going on here? Our next show is Wednesday, and I've been popping some up here. Let me do some quick shout outs. So, Evil Deities Deep Delve. This was Gary's idea, so I guess he's going to have to help out again. But and I guarantee you that we're going to talk about a lot of demons in this too. So we're not going to just limit it. We're going to, because they're in Greyhawk, so we're going to hit some of the demon princes and lords.
Okay, everybody, get your dragon articles circa 2005. Read everything James wrote.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes. All the Demonicons of Igwolf. You want to read all those. for this
Look
deep
for all the
delve.
hidden meanings and all those poems.
Yes, exactly. You gave me that idea now. You kind of
Yeah.
pointed
Just-
it out. So yeah.
Just don't let your children look over your shoulder.
Yeah.
So that'll be on Wednesday. Thursday, our normal game night. Starts a 2-week prelude adventure for Virtual Greyhawk Con called The Searchers. Yes, I ripped it off from one of the top 10 movies of all time, The Western with John Wayne. It'll be a 2-week adventure, and that'll lead into what's going on during my Virtual Greyhawk Con All-Star game. It's also a Gamescape 3D sponsor giveaway drawing. That is Thursday night, and that'll start. Adventure number 890. There you go. So we're moving right along. One day I'll get to 1,000, but I'll probably be retired from everything by that point. Next, Gabbin. It's going to be a good one. It's a week before Virtual Greyhawk Con. It'll be Greyhawk Reborn and other Virtual Greyhawk Con DMs in a round table. So it'll be Dave Guerreri, Jay Stupinski, John Lent, Amy Crittenden, Renee Ayala, who's from Living Greyhawk, and of course we've got to have William Henry Dvorak because he's been on every single one. It'll be the 6th DM round table, and that'll be next Sunday. All right, now some Virtual Greyhawk Con events. Please, we got like about a dozen games that still have spots. Please, if you haven't signed up for something, there's some really great DMs who have some openings. Scott Casper has an opening now in his game. Someone canceled. Amy Crittenden's second game has no signups. Renee Ayala needs signups. There's just come on. Let's help everyone out here and get some of these RPGs filled. We got 60 some events. It's going very well, but let's try and get as many as we can filled up. So can you sign up on the day night of? I would say yeah, you can, but it may be a little bit tough of coordination. But Canadian, if you can't do it till then, hey, that's fine. But I would reach out to the DM who you're thinking about playing with and say, hey, just talk to them. I would just say if I'm not at work, can I get in this game? That would be a good way to do it. All right, so here's some highlights. Anna's seminar is Friday night. We all know that, October 2nd. It'll be a fantastic seminar. Tim's game, and everyone's been talking to me about how great they love Tim with Carlos playing, and Anna's playing in this, and Will, you're playing in this, and now Gaetano is taking Jason Zavoda's spot, I believe, in this as well, because we all know Jason's not feeling very well. So Gaetano's playing in this, and Matt Lazinski, Dark Hand Heartstrike with Tim DMing, and I'll be producing that one, and that's going to be crazy. And then Saturday night, I got Luke, Eric, Anna, Gary, Steven Chenal, Chuck Combo in the All-Star game. I'm so excited about playing that old school 1E2E. It'll be fun. And then to close off that Sunday night, the Ask the Experts, I got Len, Gary, Alan Grodall Growy, and Dennis Meldon Tetro, and I'm trying to get a 5th person. That person has not committed yet, but I'm trying to get a 5th person for the Ask the Experts. There you go. One last thing. There's another big event. The week after is Luke Gygax's Autumn Revel. All right. So we are Gabbin 112 that Sunday, World of Greyhawk and its virtual community. Right now it's Leonard, Anna, myself, John Birchfield, and Casey Brown's going to go over to Living Greyhawk. John's going to do talk about Blue Box, and we may add a couple more guests for that, and that'll be the week after. So there you go. Hope you all had a great show, and I hope you all learned some things. Thank you so very much for your time. James, and I will contact you and Jason. Maybe have you playing the same game down the road, maybe in November or something like that.
Jason has killed so many of my characters.
You want revenge on him?
I've only killed his character once.
Oh.
But it was at the end of a campaign, and he was like 19th level and like.
Oh,
Oh.
it counts more.
It
when
counts
you kill
for 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I could maybe torture him a little bit for you, just playing around. So
Excellent.
yeah,
Use
absolutely.
spiders.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Yeah.
One last thing. If you watched last night and participated in last night's game, thank you. The Living Greyhawk G-Hoff people were fantastic. I had Casey and Anna in there, along with Jose Ortiz and Eric Menji and a lot of other people. It was a great night. Thank you for such a fun
game.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It was
That
such a
was-
fun game last night.
Yep.
It's on Twitch and YouTube, both if you want to watch that. So we're going to raid into Sorrow's Tale. Alrighty, and everyone have a great night. Thank you so very much. Now Jay's gonna hit a wrong button. I hit a wrong button to start, but let's see if I get the right
good.
button here. Boom!
Smash the keyboard.
You smash it.
Yep.
All right, here comes. We're gonna raid into Sorrows. Give me 1 sec to set this up.
And it takes like 10 seconds or something.
Yeah, I gotta hit some right buttons here. Boom, boom. Starting it up. It always works, Sasser, but you weren't at the beginning of the show. I hit the wrong button at the very beginning. I actually hit to this screen to start off. So,
Yep.
all right, 5 seconds. We're gonna rate in 4, 3. Buttons are hardball for. Yeah. Have a good one. We'll see you Wednesday night. I hit the button there. James, thanks. What
Yeah,
a.
no, that was a lot of fun.
I'm so glad you had a good time. It's like
Yeah.
I know I know how busy you must be and all. So it's one of those man. There's such great stories. I just love to hear them.
Oh yeah, and
And,
I'd love to be on again if you want to go.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, we can maybe
absolutely.
have more of we can have several of you